Chapter 1913. Wow! At the top of a cliff, the young girls of the gypsies looked at the scene in front of them, and couldn't help but exclaim in surprise. That was a rare sight of snow in normal times. Romania was a country with almost the same solar cycle as Japan. If Japan was welcoming winter, it was almost winter here too. However, the temperature here was lower and colder than Japan, and some places snowed all winter. This was one of those places. Therefore, the scene in front of them was completely covered by white snow, and the temperature was quite low. Even demons would feel cold. Therefore, the gypsies had already changed into winter clothes, and only Noah and Athaziel were still wearing their own clothes. Looking ahead, everyone could clearly see a city in front of them. It was a city surrounded by a hazy fog. That was naturally the city of vampires. In the city of vampires, the modern buildings were like a circle surrounding a magnificent castle. That castle was the royal city of the Capes faction. The buildings around the royal city had a contemporary style, as well as ancient medieval mansions. Combined together and covered with thick snow, it looked quite incredible. However, regardless of whether they were modern mansions or ancient mansions, the buildings here all shared a common characteristic. That was, no matter which building it was, there were very few windows or even none at all. For vampires who lived in the dark, the purpose of windows was probably just for ventilation, and not for sunlight to shine in. After all, sunlight was the weakness of vampires. Because of this, at this time of the day, almost all vampires who were night residents were sleeping at home, and very few people were walking around in the city. Even if there were people walking around, those people would wear thick clothes in order to not expose their skin. Of course, even if they didn't do this, there would still be people who moved around during the day, right? Noah heard that vampires were divided into daywalkers and nightwalkers. As the name implied, the former were vampires who could move around in the sun, but they were relatively rare. The latter were absolute residents of the dark, completely unable to move around in the sun, and made up the majority of vampires. Gasper inherited the bloodline of a daywalker, and with his human part, Gasper could move around in the sun as usual. Other than that, the nightwalkers were also active during the day, because in the vampire city, it was always shrouded in a very thick fog during the day. It was a fog created by a vampire's ability. Controlling fog was one of the abilities of vampires. If it was a high-ranking vampire, it wouldn't be strange for him to create a fog that covered an entire city. The fog was both a barrier and a means to detect the enemy. It could also block the sunlight, allowing the vampires to gain a certain degree of mobility during the day. By the way, the Camilla faction was located not too far away from here. Therefore, the arrival of Noah and his party should not only have been reported to the Capaci faction, but also to the Camilla faction. Our first destination is the royal city of the Sapici faction, Athaziel said to everyone. There, we need to talk to King Seps first, and then decide what to do next. The arrival of Noah and his party must have attracted the attention of the Capaci faction and the Camilla faction. Next, the Capaci faction should send someone here to contact Noah and his party. The Camilla faction, whose negotiations had failed, should also make corresponding countermeasures. It was even possible that they would send someone to prevent Noah and his party from contacting the Capaci faction. In other words, a battle could happen at any time. If they didn't enter a state of alert at this time, they would definitely be at a disadvantage if they were ambushed. Under such circumstances, Athaziel had entered a state of mental concentration, and the Jamanli's followers were in a formation. Although it was called a formation, it was actually to let Gasper, who was in charge of support, and Isha, who was in charge of healing, stay in the middle. The rest of the people surrounded the two of them, ready to deal with the enemy at any time. Only Noah left the main group and went forward boldly. He came to the edge of the cliff and looked at the city in the distance. At this time, Noah felt that the huge city was shrouded in an undercurrent instead of a fog. There was an indescribable sense of oppression. It's too quiet. Noah couldn't help but whisper. There's an indescribable silence. It's like the dead silence before the storm. This was the feeling that the Capaci faction's capital gave Noah, and this feeling gradually became stronger as time passed. The Jamanli's followers began to look at each other. Asashel furrowed his brows tightly as he muttered under his breath. That's not right. It's been so long. Even if the Camilla faction didn't take action, the Keipeshi faction should have taken action. Why hasn't anyone come? This was really a little abnormal. For the extremely xenophobic vampires, if someone broke into their territory, it was impossible not to send someone to check. But until now, neither the Keipeshi faction nor the Camilla faction had come. That was too abnormal. Just as this thought appeared in everyone's mind, Noah's eyes flashed, and he withdrew his gaze from the vampire city. He turned his head and looked in another direction. Seeing Noah's action, the Jamonli's followers were stunned. Only Athathiel immediately turned his head and looked in that direction with Noah. It seems that we have someone else to entertain us. Asashel folded his arms, and 12 black wings suddenly spread out from his back. His gaze was fixed in front of him. Aren't you going to come out and say hello? If the Jamonli's followers still did not react, they would be real fools. At that moment, all the Jamonli's subordinates suddenly turned around and stared ahead, mana fluctuations rising from their bodies. It was only at this moment that a casual voice sounded softly. Was it so easy to be discovered? As expected of the governor of the godslayers and fallen angels. As these words were spoken, a figure slowly walked out from the forest in front of them. The newcomer had a head of silver hair. It was not Wally. It was Euclid, who Noah had met once yesterday. Sure enough, we meet again in the territory of the vampires. Euclid immediately looked at Noah and spread his hands. I knew you would come sooner or later, but I didn't expect it to be so soon. Noah didn't say anything. He just looked at Euclid. Nobody knew what he was thinking. On the other hand, Lyeth looked at the silver-haired Euclid with a somewhat bewildered expression. That appearance, that silver hair, and that aura, it's like, really like. Lyeth's whisper clearly reached Euclid's ears. Euclid turned his gaze and looked at Lyeth. Looking at Lyeth's bright red hair, his eyes became extremely cold and indifferent. Same to you, Lyeth Gimli. When I see your red hair, I can't help but think of Syzax, that hateful fake demon king. A fake demon king? She stared straight at Euclid. Are you a demon of the old demon king's faction? You don't need to know. No, it should be said that you will know sooner or later, Euclid said coldly. Then his gaze turned back to Noah. You are a little late. Just last night, there was a coup in the Saipesh faction. Now the Saipesh king has fled, and a new king has been born. That person is the holder of the Holy Grail. What? Asashel exclaimed. Coup. Gimli's kin were also shocked. Even Noah was slightly startled and showed a surprised expression. Coup. A coup at this time? Isn't that too much of a coincidence? Could this also be the arrangement of the massive calamity? By the way, the newly crowned king is no stranger to the vampires over there. Euclid glanced at Gasper, the corners of his mouth slowly rising. The new king is called Valerie Saipesh. You haven't forgotten, have you? Valerie? Gasper's eyes widened, full of disbelief. That expression made Euclid smile happily. If you rush over now, you might be able to see a good show. After saying that, Euclid decisively retreated and left the scene. Wait. Gimli's kin instinctively wanted to chase after him. Don't chase. Asashel immediately stopped them and said with a serious expression. Saipesh is more important now. The Jamonli subordinates glanced at each other and stopped. Asashel then looked at Noah. Noah met Asashel's gaze, nodded, and said concisely, Let's go. Everyone immediately soared into the sky without hesitation, turning into streaks of light as they flew towards the foggy vampire city, rushing towards the royal city of Opesh at top speed. Flying in the air, the cold wind whistled in their ears. However, Noah could still clearly hear Gasper's low muttering. Valerie. How could? It seemed that things were far more troublesome than he had imagined. Chapter 1914. Whoosh! The gale continued to howl. It was extremely cold and stung everyone's skin. With Noah and Asashel taking the lead, the gypsies spread their bat-like demonic wings and flew towards the royal city of Seeps as fast as they could. The buildings under them were like a revolving lantern, constantly receding behind them. Undoubtedly, there was a coup in the royal city. Even the new king had been elected, and the Seeps king was still on the run. However, the residents outside the royal city were calm as if nothing had happened. It made one's heart palpitate. Under such circumstances, everyone flew forward as fast as they could. Until a certain moment, a strange pressure suddenly surged from the front like an invisible wave and enveloped Noah's group. Everyone who was flying at high speed revealed shocked expressions one after another. "Stop!" Athashel yelled out. All of a sudden, Asashel and his subordinates came to an abrupt halt in midair, as though someone had slammed on the brakes. Feeling the pressure that pervaded the entire space, Noah also stopped. For the first time, his expression became solemn. Because the pressure was extremely strong. It was so strong that it was comparable to any of the three main gods of Greek mythology, Zeus, Hades, and Poseidon that Noah had fought before. Under this pressure, Noah slowly raised his head and looked forward. On the only way to Seeps' royal city, a figure seemed to be waiting for the arrival of Noah and his party. He slowly floated in midair. It was a man. A very inconceivable man. The man was wearing a black coat, and his hair was fluttering in the wind. It was black and gold, as if they were naturally intertwined. The man's eyes also had two colors. His left eye was a very deep black. His right eye was a very bright gold. The aura that fluctuated around him seemed to be able to grasp one's heart tightly and crush it into pieces. It was terrifying and dangerous. Looking at the figure who had appeared out of nowhere and blocked everyone's path, everyone's body tensed up and cold sweat began to drip down their faces, including Asashel. At this moment, everyone clearly understood one thing. That man was definitely not ordinary. It was not a joke. The oppressive aura emanating from that person's body was already stronger than that of a god or demon king. "It's him?" Asashel stared at the man and clenched his fists. Did he really resurrect? Resurrect. Since Asashel said so, the man's identity was almost revealed. "It can't be." Genova's voice became a little hoarse. "Is that man an evil dragon?" "That's right. That man was an evil dragon." At least, Noah's superb senses told him that the aura fluctuating from that man was definitely not an aura that a human could have. It was an evil aura that was deeper, denser, and scarier than Glendale's. Although it was not like Glendale's aura that gave off a clear sense of evil, the man's aura made one's head tremble and constantly sent a message to his master. Danger. That man was extremely dangerous. At this moment, Draeger's voice also rang in Noah's mind. Although he looks like a human, but with this aura, I don't even need to think to know who he is. Partner, you've encountered a powerful dragon. That guy, is he really an evil dragon? It's not just an evil dragon, it's the infamous evil dragon, Dalag said. Even among the evil dragons he is one of the strongest existences, the dark dragon of the new moon Clon Cuvok. Clon Cuvok, the descendant of the Celtic demon god Balor. He had killed the divine king of the Danu gods Nuada. He was one of the strongest evil dragons alongside Az Dahaka and Apophis. Now he appeared in front of Noah's group in his human form. Who would have thought that they would encounter one of the strongest evil dragons in the legends at this time? Clon Cuvok was one of the strongest among the dragon kings, only below the sky dragon level. The group of underage demons were so nervous that their palms were sweating. This is going to be troublesome. Asashel couldn't help but mutter. Even if it's me, I'm still no match for that guy. Yes. Even the governor, whose strength was above the ordinary demon king level, and enjoyed the highest level of power in the fallen angel camp, was no match for Clon Cuvok. Otherwise, Noah wouldn't be so serious. Noah glanced at the Opesh kingdom in front of him, then looked at Clon Cuvok, who was emitting a terrifying aura, and said indifferently, "You guys go first. You guys go first. Leave this to me, teacher." The Jamanli's subordinates were startled, and turned to look at Noah. "Let's go," Asashel said decisively. "Noah is the only one among us who can suppress that strongest evil dragon. If we stay, we'll just be a hindrance." With that said, Asashel didn't hesitate at all. He flapped the 12 wings on his back and flew in the direction of the Sepe's royal city. The Zamanli subordinates hesitated. "Let's go." Liaz bit her lip and ordered. "Leave this to teacher." As soon as Liaz gave the order, the Zymonians had nothing else to say. "Teacher, Please be careful. With that, the Jumanli subordinates followed behind Athashel and flew in the direction of the KPZ royal city. Klon Kovak didn't even move when he saw Athashel and the Jumanli's kin flying towards Kaipesh. His gaze landed directly on Noah's body. Noah, who was prepared to launch a thunderous attack when Klon Kuvak attacked Liaz and the others, raised an eyebrow. He met Klon Kuvaka's gaze and seemed to understand something. I see. Noah understood instantly. So he's coming for me from the beginning? Although he's different from that lunatic Glendale, Klon Kuvak is very interested in powerful dragons, Drake said. He probably knows that you're the current Crimson Dragon Emperor, so he's interested in you. You have to be careful. That guy isn't something Glendale can compare to. An evil dragon that was second only to a sky dragon. As one of the two sky dragons, Drake knew very well the difference between Klon Kuvak and Glendale. That was why even though he knew about Noah's abilities, Drake couldn't help but remind him. Bam! However, before D-Leg could finish his sentence, a deep sonic boom suddenly resounded. The figure in front of him suddenly shot in front of Noah like a cannonball. He clenched his hand, which turned into a ferocious dragon claw. With a sharp sound, he cut through the air and viciously clawed at Noah's chest. That attack came suddenly and fiercely, and there was no room for error. Once hit, even if he didn't die, he would definitely be severely injured. If Noah didn't have superb senses, he probably wouldn't have been able to react in time, right? That was why Noah's eyes suddenly focused, and the majestic energy circulating in his body instantly turned into divine power. Wong! In the next instant, a dazzling golden aura fluctuated around Noah's body. It condensed and quickly turned into a solid shield of light. PSHHH. The sharp and ferocious dragon claw didn't stop at all. It directly landed on the shield of light, and actually pierced through it. Immediately after, the sharp dragon claw was like a deadly scythe. It didn't lose its momentum, and went straight for Noah's chest. Seeing that, Noah's eyes became more and more focused, but he didn't dodge. Instead, his entire body surged with even more violent divine power, replenishing the penetrated shield of light. The shield of light that was cleanly penetrated was replenished by the vast divine power. It was as if it was frozen, and the sharp and ferocious dragon claw was firmly locked in place. The ferocious dragon claw that swept towards Noah's chest suddenly stopped. In the next second, Noah spat out a word. Explode. The condensed shield of light flashed with intense light. Chapter 1915. Kaboom. In the foggy sky, a thunderous roar suddenly resounded, shaking the extremely dense fog in the surroundings to the point that it suddenly stagnated. It was as if it was swept up by a gale, stirring up the fog. The violent impact was accompanied by a burst of dazzling light in the air. It was as if a meteorite had suddenly exploded there, stirring up an extremely powerful shock wave and dazzling light that surged to the surroundings like a tide. Immediately after, two figures were blasted out from the explosion, causing friction with the air. Under the sharp sound of breaking through the air, as if riding on the powerful shock wave, they slid hundreds of meters away before finally coming to a stop. Noah raised his eyes and looked ahead. Coincidentally, Klon Kowak also looked over, and a hint of emotion finally appeared in its heterochromatic eyes. After an unknown amount of time, the powerful shockwave and blinding light that swept across the sky gradually dissipated. Noah and Klon Kowak stood some distance apart, looking at each other as if they were both getting to know each other again. They fell into silence. After a while, Klon Kowak spoke. You are very strong. As soon as he spoke, the legendary mystic dragon, who enjoyed the title of the strongest evil dragon, acknowledged Noah's strength. That extremely sincere tone caused Noah to be involuntarily stunned, and a strange feeling arose in his heart. Evil dragons were extremely dangerous and uncontrollable existences. This was something that Drake had mentioned to Noah in the beginning. Therefore, almost all of the legendary evil dragons had been exterminated, and only left behind in history. Because of this, Noah thought that the evil dragons were like Glendale. Even if they weren't as crazy, there must be something wrong with them. However, Klon Kowak gave Noah a feeling similar to Orpheus. It wasn't that Klon Kowak was as innocent as Orpheus, but that it was in his heart. This strongest evil dragon seemed to be like Orpheus, very pure, and not as crazy and dangerous as Noah had imagined. The more powerful the dragon, the purer it is? Recalling what Drake had told him in the past, Noah felt that this theory could be applied to the evil dragons as well. However, no matter how pure the cloned Koa was, this evil dragon was still very dangerous. There was no doubt about that. Disregarding everything else, the power displayed by the other party just now was enough to put Noah in danger several times. The title of the strongest evil dragon below the heavenly dragon was not just for show. Noah suppressed the strange feeling in his heart and met Clon Quoch's gaze. You are also stronger than I thought. Other than Orpheus, you are the strongest dragon I have ever seen in this world. As expected of the evil dragon who once killed the divine king of the Danu gods. However, if you want to stop me, you should at least show your true form, right? Although he was facing Noah as a human, Clone Kuvok was undoubtedly a dragon. Just now, when Clone Kuvok attacked Noah, didn't he transform his arm into a ferocious dragon claw? This proved that Clone Kuvok's current form was only a disguise, and his true form was still that of a dragon. And of course, only by transforming into a true dragon would Clone Kuvok's full strength be displayed. In the short exchange just now, Clone Kuvok did not use his full strength at all. Clone Kuvok seemed to have seen through Noah's thoughts and shook his head lightly. Indeed, the power that the dragon form and the human form can display is different, but in terms of strength, the difference isn't that big. After all, although the dragon form can display more power, the human form is more flexible in all aspects and has its own advantages. Changing one's form according to the situation will also be very advantageous in battle. And I think that, to deal with you, it's not enough to just rely on brute force. So, in the attack just now, I used my human form and also transformed into a dragon's hand. It can be considered as a half-dragon, which should be the best form to deal with you. As he said that, Clone Kovac stared at Noah with a burning gaze. Also, you didn't use the power of a dragon, did you? I know that you are the current Crimson Dragon Emperor. From Clone Kovac's eyes and words, Noah could feel the other party's attachment to the word dragon. Just like what Drake said, Clone Kovac must have an unusual view and thought about dragons. Understanding this, Noah, who was preparing to use another cosmology, glanced at Clone Kovac with a meaningful look. Then he dismissed the idea of using another cosmology. Now was the time to race against time. The coup d'état in Seep's kingdom was still ongoing. With that in mind, the best course of action was to use another cosmology and take down the strongest evil dragon. However, with Clone Kovac's attachment to dragons, if Noah couldn't satisfy him, perhaps this evil dragon would be like Glendale and pester Noah until he died. In that case, in terms of time, it would be more likely that he would be pestered even longer after using another cosmology. If that's the case, I might as well satisfy you a little. As soon as Noah finished speaking, a crimson-red gauntlet flashed and appeared on his right hand. Clone Kovac's gaze immediately landed on the gauntlet. His black and gold eyes seemed to be able to see the soul residing in the divine artifact. He spoke softly. Long time no see, Drake. Clone Kovac's words made the jade on the back of the gauntlet flash. Indeed, it has been a long time. Drake's voice came from the jade. The last time we met was when I wasn't sealed and you weren't destroyed, right? The last time we met, you weren't like this. Clone Kovac tilted his head and said. However, you're wrong about one thing. I haven't been destroyed. What? Noah was stunned. Haven't been destroyed? Drake was even more shocked. You haven't been destroyed? That's right. Clone Kovac nodded. Let's not talk about the other evil dragons, but I haven't been destroyed. After all, compared to the other evil dragons, I'm considered honest, so no one targeted me. In other words, you've been alive since ancient times until now. Drake seemed to be in disbelief. Then what have you been doing all this time? Nothing much. Clone Kovac said. I've been observing dragons all over the world, and persisted in training. Such a pure and honest answer. Not to mention Drake, even Noah was speechless. Observing dragons all over the world all this time? With Clone Kovac's persistence towards dragons, that was indeed possible. But persisting in training all this time? Since before Drake was sealed, Clone Kuvok had persisted in training all this time? In that case, what level had the evil dragon, who had been known as the strongest evil dragon after the heavenly dragon, reached? As if he saw through Noah and Drake's thoughts, Clone Kuvok suddenly smiled and his entire body surged with a terrifying aura. That aura was far more powerful than what they felt before. That was what Clone Kovac had said. Now even if it's the old Drake, I don't think I'll lose. His words caused Noah's eyes to narrow slowly. I've miscalculated, partner. Drake's voice became serious. Clone Kovac has probably surpassed himself and reached the level of a Rubian and I. What did this mean? That evil dragon has most likely reached the level of a sky dragon. Even if it's compared to the top 10 in the world, it wouldn't lose out. This was Clone Kovac's true strength. At this moment, a burst of laughter rang out in the air. An evil dragon that has reached the level of a sky dragon? I'm interested in you. Following this sentence, a white meteor shot out from the other side of the sky. Chapter 1916. Silver Juggernaut Overdrive. Fall the absolute law to the White Dragon Emperor of Darkness. Noah, on the other hand, was completely stunned. That juggernaut form can only be used for a few minutes. If the power is overused, it may even be counted in seconds. Therefore, Wally Lucifer will probably end the battle quickly. Noah directly went into the hole. Just as Drake had said, Varley's figure suddenly transformed into a white meteor, drawing several beautiful trajectories as he violently shot towards Clone Quoch's direction. In the flash of silver, the pure white color of Wally's armor was mixed with silver, gradually turning into a silver full-body armor. Its shape also changed slightly, becoming like an organic composition. The two heavenly dragons that have been fighting and killing since ancient times are actually standing together like this. It's really a rare scene. The most basic point was that the Tyrannosaurus was a power born from a curse. When it was activated, it would be accompanied by astonishing resentment and hatred. It was extremely ominous. Is that so? Clone Kowak stopped smiling and nodded very seriously. That's right. A battle without any glory is meaningless. Even if you are a dragon that is called the embodiment of power, you should follow your own glory and fight. Thank you for letting me see your way of the dragon, White Dragon Emperor. It was a power that was very similar to the Tyrannosaurus, but it was poles apart. The two were actually evenly matched. It looked like a real white dragon. A coup was taking place in the royal city, but the ordinary residents outside were not aware of it at all. With such a whisper, an unprecedented and astonishing power soared from Wally's body, turning into spiritual energy that was visible to the naked eye, surging in all directions. However, Wally Lucifer has adjusted the Tyrannosaurus and redeveloped it. He only drew out the power of the Tyrannosaurus and completely swallowed the curse with his own fighting spirit, causing the Tyrannosaurus to evolve into a new form. It avoids danger and can still grow. It was difficult for a heavenly dragon's power to defeat a real heavenly dragon for only a few minutes. Varley's whole body swelled with a terrifying aura, like a hurricane sweeping in all directions. With that, Noah no longer paid any attention to the two meteors colliding repeatedly in the sky. They flew in the direction of the royal city of Opesh. It was just that Noah's swaggering intrusion attracted a huge commotion. Clone Kowak, one of the strongest evil dragons in the legends. He has been training since ancient times, and has already reached the level of a heavenly dragon. Varley stared at Clone Kowak, his voice filled with battle intent. The deafening sound of the collision resounded. I just think that a battle without glory is meaningless, Wally said bluntly. Simply put, Tyrannosaurus Rex had no side effects at all. Tyrannosaurus Rex without any side effects. I shall become the Immaculate Dragon Emperor. Sensing the terrifying aura emanating from Wally's body, Clone Kowak's expression became more and more solemn, but at the same time, his fighting spirit also burned like flames. However, at this moment, the Tyrannosaurus Rex that Wally activated did not have any negative emotions or ominous aura. Under such circumstances, Wally bathed in an astonishing amount of spirit energy, like an erupting volcano. The wings of light on his back spread out, and one of his hands was raised high. The pure white armor was wrapped in a holy light, and the precious gems on every part of it immediately blossomed with dazzling light. I shall awaken as an opponent, it's really the most suitable. However, at this moment, a big hole had been broken in the barrier. It should be the work of Asashel and Jamanli's subordinates. Moreover, it was Wally who had entered the forbidden state. Because the opponent also chose to fight with pure strength, that's why they are evenly matched, right? But it was precisely because of this that Noah was so surprised. Noah, who had seen Wally's Tyrannosaurus Rex, was certain that the power Wally was using now was very similar to Tyrannosaurus Rex, but it was fundamentally different from Tyrannosaurus Rex. The power that the previous Crimson Dragon Emperor and White Dragon Emperor were unable to achieve was now finally achieved by Wally. If we must fight, I hope to challenge him as Wally Lucifer, and not follow the fate of the Crimson Dragon Emperor and White Dragon Emperor and fight without any purpose. The white meteor and the black meteor soared into the sky like two thunderbolts chasing after each other. All the way up, they collided again and again, stirring up sounds of collision that shook the heavens and the earth. It set off waves of shockwaves that stirred up the space, causing this part of the world to suddenly become a battlefield that no one could enter. In terms of strength alone, Tyrannosaurus Rex is definitely at the heavenly dragon level. Since that Tyrannosaurus Rex has inherited all of Tyrannosaurus Rex's strength, it's naturally the same. However, if it's just strength that's at the heavenly dragon level, it can't compare to the strongest evil dragon that has truly reached the heavenly dragon level, Drake said. What did this mean? Even so, in the end, Wally should be undefeatable, right? The energy fluctuations on Wally's body continued to rise, causing space to distort slightly. The surrounding fog also became chaotic and trembled. If that's the case, then thank me with a battle. Wally took a step forward and said in a low voice, I won't accompany you, Klonkwatch. Let's fight again next time if we have the chance. I will lead thee to the pinnacle of silver fantasy and demonic path. This generation's Crimson Dragon Emperor and White Dragon Emperor are both terrifying existences that the previous generations cannot compare to. Although Tyrannosaurus Rex is very outstanding in terms of strength, it is accompanied by life-threatening danger and the possibility of going berserk. That is a cursed power. Drake's voice sounded in Noah's mind. Klonkwatch resolutely used his full strength against Wally, who was using Tyrannosaurus Rex. A shockwave suddenly spread out like a huge explosion, setting off a frenzied airflow that mixed with the dense fog in the surroundings and rushed in all directions. In the next second, Klonkwatch turned into a black meteor and shot forward, meeting the white meteor head-on. White Dragon Emperor. Klonkwatch looked at Wally, then looked at Noah, who was standing side by side with Wally, and couldn't help but smile. It was a person covered in pure white armor with a pair of faint blue light wings on his back. A burst of silver light blossomed from Wally's body, instantly illuminating the entire world and dispelling the surrounding fog. Surprisingly, it was Wally. In the past, Noah and Wally had fought before. Noah Dole, look carefully, this is the power I developed to defeat you. Noah's eyes also flickered slightly and his gaze fell on Wally. The reason was that Kepeshi's entire royal city was enveloped by a huge barrier. Silver Tyrannosaurus Rex. In that battle, Wally used Tyrannosaurus Rex and displayed a power that was not inferior to gods and demon kings. However, although the danger is avoided, the consumption is unavoidable, right? Drake said. Dong. However, since Wally blocked the opponent, I'm happy to do so. Noah smiled. Immediately, Wally began to chant. Klonkwatch immediately roared to the sky, and his body suddenly expanded, bursting the coat on his body. In the blink of an eye, he turned into a pitch-black dragon, shaking with a terrifying aura. In the sharp sound of breaking through the air, the white meteor streaked across the sky, carrying a whistling force. Under Klonkwatch's gaze, it swept past Noah's side. At this moment, Klonkwatch's gaze suddenly froze. Only then did the white meteor stop, revealing its full appearance under the light. It's not just you, partner. White Dragon Emperor is also exploring a new way to use Tyrannosaurus Rex and has succeeded. Drake said solemnly and helplessly. Roar, 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 roar. Whoosh. After all, although Tyrannosaurus Rex did not have the side effects of Tyrannosaurus Rex, The consumption was unavoidable and could only be maintained for a few minutes at most. Through the dream of dawn with infinite destruction, go to Tyrannosaurus. Chapter 1917. Oha. When Noah landed on the open space in front of the main city, a large group of fully armed soldiers rushed out of the buildings in all directions and surrounded Noah. Noah, who had superb sensing ability, had long noticed that there was a very strong vampiric aura in the surrounding buildings, and there were quite a lot of them. However, he did not know whether they were the government or anti-government soldiers of the Sepishi faction, so he did not make a move. However, the vampires that swarmed out of the buildings in all directions did not seem to have such concerns. The leader of the vampires ordered, "Are they the fallen angel and demon companions who just came to help King Sepish? Kill him for me." Now, Noah didn't even need to ask to know which side the other party was from. There was no doubt that these vampires were all anti-government soldiers who had uncovered the coup d'état. Oha! Amidst the surging shouts, the vampire soldiers surrounding Noah all raised the weapons in their hands and charged at Noah. A sharp light flashed in Noah's eyes. Just like that, the densely packed vampire soldiers instantly drowned Noah like a human tide. Bang! In the next instant, a surge of divine power exploded from the center of the tide of vampire soldiers, turning into a substantial impact that swept out like a violent storm. Ah! The blood-curdling screams of the vampires resounded. Each and every one of them was sent flying like a piece of trash, crashing into the surrounding buildings and cracking the walls. What? The vampire who had just given the order was shocked. In just a short moment, an entire army of vampires was annihilated? How was this possible? At this moment, a figure dashed in front of the vampire, stretched out his hand, grabbed the vampire's collar, and lifted him up. "You did mention the fallen angel and the devil just now, right?" Noah looked at the vampire, and his dark eyes flashed with a cold light. "Where are they?" That vampire seemed to be truly frightened. With trembling lips and trembling hands, he pointed in the direction of the main city. There, a hole was blasted open in the wall. Noah immediately threw the vampire on the ground, then sped up his pace, entered the hole, and entered the castle. Asashel and the Jamanli subordinates seemed to be racing against time. They ignored the vampire army guarding outside, and directly entered the castle to cause a ruckus. At the very least, after entering the castle, Noah could see traces of the walls, floor, and ceiling being blasted apart. There were also vampire soldiers lying all over the ground. It was apparent that a huge battle had taken place. Whether these traces of battle were left behind by Asashel and the Jaimonians, or by Seps's government faction against the anti-government faction, was unknown. Thus, if they followed the traces left behind by the battle, it was very likely that they wouldn't run into Asashel and Zamanli's men in the end. Fortunately, there were still some remnants of the light and mana used in the battle between Asashel and the Jamanli followers in the air. Noah used his extraordinary sensing ability to follow the remnants of the light and mana and rushed in a direction. However, at a certain moment, in the range of Noah's sensing ability, an extremely familiar aura suddenly appeared. Noah's footsteps slowed and he stopped where he was. He closed his eyes and fully activated his sensing ability, feeling that aura over and over again. After a while, Noah seemed to have confirmed something and opened his eyes. Then, Noah's expression became hesitant. To be honest, Noah really wanted to go to the location of that aura. Because since that aura had appeared, Noah definitely couldn't sit back and do nothing. However, Asashel and the Jamanli followers were also fighting in this castle, and it was very likely that they had already encountered the other evil dragons. Against the legendary evil dragons, Asashel would be fine, but the Jamanli followers would be in danger. However, there shouldn't be any problems, right? After all, Noah could sense that there was still some power in the remnants of the light and mana in the air. That was the power of Black Cat, Luffy, Arthur, Monkey, and Fenrir. At the same time, as Wally's teammates, those with extraordinary backgrounds, also began to move. They were probably with Asashel and the Jamanli followers. With those people, at least the safety of the Jamanli followers would be guaranteed. Thinking of this, Noah turned his gaze to the location of that familiar aura. Since the clone Koa had appeared and blocked Noah's path, It proved that the group of disasters who had obtained the power of the evil dragon wanted the anti-government faction to succeed in their coup d'état and drive out the government's vampires. In other words, the group of disasters was most likely working together with the anti-government faction that started the coup. The previous rulers of the Zepesh faction should not have known about this. The evidence was that the holder of the Holy Grail had become the new king of the Zepesh faction, while the old Zepesh king had begun to flee during the coup. As an indispensable force in reviving the evil dragons, the anti-government faction that supported the holder of the Holy Grail to become the new king of the Zepesh faction was naturally the target of the group of disasters. In other words, the opponents were not only the anti-government faction, but also the evil dragons and members of the group of disasters. And the familiar aura that appeared in the range of Noah's sensing ability was currently an insurmountable trump card of the group of disasters. If Asashel and the Jumanli followers met with Wali's team, even if they were all tied together, only death awaited them. Considering this point, it was better to go over there first. Thus, Noah finally made a decision. He lifted his feet and slowly walked towards the location of that aura. Tap, 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 tap. Strong and powerful footsteps were extremely clear in the corridor. Noah looked straight ahead and walked forward without hesitation. As Noah approached, the familiar aura became stronger and stronger, until a certain moment, Noah finally saw it. In front of him, in the middle of a group of vampires that had fallen on the ground, a petite figure stood there. It was a young girl with an extremely cute face wearing a dark-colored dress. The girl's appearance was only 12 or 13 years old, very young and tender. However, the atmosphere around the young girl had a profound feeling, as if it was a tranquil dark night, intoxicating. That feeling, that appearance, to Noah, was simply too familiar, because for more than a month, the original owner of that face had been living under the same roof as Noah, eating together, sleeping together, and even bathing together. How could they not be familiar with each other? Thus, Noah almost subconsciously called out softly, "Orpheus." Yes, Orpheus. She looked exactly like Orpheus. Even the aura was not the slightest bit different. The only difference was that she tied up her waist-length black hair with a hairband, leaving a single ponytail hairstyle. Of course, that petite girl was not Orpheus. Although her appearance and aura were exactly the same as Orpheus, Noah was sure that she was definitely not Orpheus. The reason was simple. The real Orpheus was left at home by Noah, and as usual, he was accompanied by Aster and Athena. If Orpheus had come here, Noah would have known. In that case, who was the petite girl who looked exactly like Orpheus, and even had the same aura as Orpheus? Noah knew. That petite girl was also Orpheus. To be precise, it should be Orpheus' clone. More than a month ago, the heroes had taken half of Orpheus' power. Chow Chow had said that the disaster squad would use half of the power to create a new Orpheus. The girl in front of him was another Orpheus. Another Orpheus created with half of the power of the infinite dragon god. In the next second, she turned her head and looked at Noah. Chapter 1918. When the petite girl's gaze turned to Noah and met with Noah's eyes, the girl's eyes never moved away again. Her behavior was exactly the same as Orpheus when Noah met him before. In addition, the other party's appearance and aura were exactly the same as Orpheus. All of a sudden, Noah seemed to have let down his guard against the girl and relaxed his shoulders. It was also at this moment that the girl suddenly disappeared from where she stood. When she reappeared, she was already in front of Noah. Noah suddenly came back to his senses, but he did not do anything. Instead, he lowered his head and looked at the girl who suddenly appeared in front of him. Immediately, the girl sniffed her cute little nose and moved closer to Noah. She looked like a small animal looking for food, which was abnormally cute. The girl who moved closer to Noah, or even to Noah, sniffed her cute nose, and her voice sounded like clear water droplets. Smell. Although the voice was very pleasant to the ears, it did not have the slightest trace of emotion. Even in this aspect, it was exactly the same as Orpheus. Smell. The girl muttered to herself while sniffing Noah's scent. It has the same smell as Lilith. Lilith? Is that the name of this Orpheus clone? The same smell as Orpheus clone? Is that referring to the smell of Orpheus? Noah thought so while looking at Lilith, who was constantly moving closer to him with no expression on her delicate and cute face, and he was very sure of it. Sure enough, even if it was a clone created by disaster, the girl in front of him was still Orpheus. The dragon god was as pure and innocent as a lotus flower, without any filth or filth. Understanding this, Noah took a deep breath, squatted down, and maintained the same height as Lilith. Their eyes met again. Your name is Lilith, right? Noah looked straight at the petite girl. My name is Noah. Naya? Lilith tilted her head and repeated. Noah? That's right, Noah. Noah smiled. A family relationship with the other you. Another me. Lilith was stunned for a moment before she stared closely at Noah. The other Lilith? Family? As expected, Lilith knew about Orpheus. However, perhaps because she hadn't been born for a long time, she seemed to be even more ignorant than Orpheus. If Orpheus' mind was at the level of a child, then Lilith's was at the level of a baby. This made Noah even more certain of his thoughts. This child could not continue to stay in the group of disasters and be used by those terrorists. So Noah said to Lilith, Do you want to be with your other self? Lilith was stunned. With my other self, Lilith. Lilith tilted her head and kept muttering. With my other self, Lilith. Yes, with your other self. Noah reached out his hand to Lilith. Be with Orpheus and become my family. Family together. Lilith sucked on a finger and stared at Noah's hand that was extended to her. Family. Together. Looking at Lilith like this, Noah secretly thought that there was a chance. However, an untimely voice suddenly rang out, stirring up a mess. Aya, that won't do. Sister Long is my trump card. I can't lose her here. Accompanied by such a frivolous voice, Lilith, who stared straight at Noah's hand, withdrew her gaze, and her petite body disappeared again, returning to her original position. Noah's face sank fiercely. He slowly stood up, then raised his head and looked ahead. At the end of the corridor, a figure was walking briskly, humming a song like a child who was walking and jumping at the same time. He walked over happily and appeared in front of Noah. Oh, this must be the famous God Slayer, right? The newcomer said in an extremely frivolous tone as he giggled. I didn't expect that even the clone Koa couldn't stop the deicide. Fortunately, I didn't run over myself out of curiosity, otherwise, I would be dead. Such frivolous words and tone came from the mouth of a middle-aged man. It was a man in his 40s with a head of very eye-catching silver hair. However, compared to the man's hair color, his outfit was more eye-catching. It was the same outfit as Sazek's. However, Sazek's outfit was real red, while the middle-aged man's was silver. As for his appearance, maybe it was Noah's illusion. Noah felt that the man's appearance seemed to be similar to Varley's. Looking at Noah, who was looking directly at him, the middle-aged man raised his eyebrows. Speaking of which, the deicide still doesn't know who I am, right? In that case, let me introduce myself to the young Godslayer. The middle-aged man pretended to salute in a playful manner. Uncle's name is Lezavim Levi Lucifer, please enlighten me. Lucifer? Noah's eyes narrowed slightly. Lezavim Levi Lucifer? Noah had heard of this name before. Lezavim Levi Lucifer. It was recorded in the Bible under the name Laren, the son of the real demon king Lucifer and the mother of demons, Lilith. In other words, Lezavim was the son of the real demon king Lucifer. Lucifer, one of the old 4 demon kings who had passed away, was the biological father of the man in front of him. What did this mean? It meant that Lezavim was Varley's blood relative who had inherited Lucifer's bloodline. That was why Noah felt that Lezavim was a bit similar to Varley. The middle-aged man in front of him was Varley's grandfather, his biological grandfather. Moreover, Noah had heard of such a rumor. In the past, in the era of the old 4 demon kings, there were 3 who were completely different from the other demons. They had extremely powerful abilities, making people wonder if they were special existences of demons. Surpassers. Simply put, they were the mutants of demons. Sarzax Gimenri and Achuka Astaroth were 2 of them. After the death of the 4 demon kings, the 2 of them obtained the demon king position of Lucifer and Beelzebub respectively with powerful abilities that surpassed demons. They were considered legends in the demon realm. The remaining surpasser was the son of the demon king who had inherited Lucifer's bloodline. Lezavim Levi Lucifer. In other words, the man in front of him was also a mutant of demons and had powerful abilities that demons did not have. Varley's grandfather? Noah first glanced at Lilith, who stayed beside Lezavim like a follower, and then looked at him coldly. I see. You're in charge of the group of disasters now, right? I have no choice. I'm related to the Godslayer. Lezavim spread out his hands. The old Demon King faction and the hero faction are finished, right? The rest of the motley crew needs someone to lead them, right? And Sister Long is like this? She can't be the leader at all, right? So only I, the son of the Demon King, can make everyone love each other? Undoubtedly, he was the son of the former real Demon King, and was equivalent to the prince of the demon realm. However, his words and actions gave people the feeling of a clown acting, which was really disgusting. At least, Noah began to wonder if the son of the Demon King in front of him was a surpasser who was as famous as Sarzax and Achuka. However, there was one thing that was certain. The current leader of the group of disasters was the son of Lucifer in front of him. If he directly killed the son of the Demon King here, then the group of disasters would really collapse, right? Lezavim did not know if he had sensed Noah's thoughts, but he laughed very happily. Son of the Godslayer, your eyes are full of murderous intent. It's so scary. Sister Long, quickly come and protect me. With that, Lezavim opened his arms in the direction of Lilith, intending to hug her. However, at this moment, an unprecedented pressure rose from Noah's body. Immediately, Noah's voice sounded. Who allowed you to touch her with your dirty hands? Chapter 1919. The sudden pressure caused the frivolous smile on Lezavim's face to freeze. His movements stiffened, and he couldn't move at all. Lilith, on the other hand, shifted her gaze back to Noah and stared at him. Her eyes, which were as deep as the night, rippled with some ripples. Lezavim could only stop what he was doing and look at Noah. Although his expression wasn't good, his frivolous smile was still there. It seems that our Godslayer really likes Sister Long. By the way, the other Sister Long seems to be on your side. How greedy. I don't deny that I'm greedy, Noah said indifferently. Whether it's Orpheus or Lilith, I'll bring them out of the disaster cluster. Is that so? Lezavim raised his eyebrows and smiled. Oh, why bother? If you want Sister Long, you just have to tell me. It's not like I can't give her to you. But there's a condition, right? Noah glanced at Lezavim with a mocking expression. That condition? Don't tell me it's for me to join the disaster cluster? Well, it seems that our Godslayer doesn't like to stay on my side. Lezavim curled his lips. If that's the case, then I can't give Sister Long to you? You can't give her to me. Noah narrowed his eyes and walked toward Lezavim step by step. Don't tell me that I need your permission for anything I want. What? Don't tell me you want to attack me? Lezavim winked at Zhangtai. Then I can only call for help. After saying that, Lezavim suddenly snapped his fingers. Clank! Suddenly, a huge teleportation array appeared on the ground behind Lezavim, blooming with dazzling light. The radiance of each magic array was different. However, the auras that rose from within were equally terrifying and powerful. Then, figures of various sizes emerged from within and appeared in this world. Roar, roar, roar. In the next instant, earth-shattering roars resounded from those figures, turning into a sound wave that reverberated in all directions. The mixed roar was like a substantial shockwave that blew away the fallen vampires on the ground and cracked the surrounding walls, ceiling, and ground. It even swept toward Noah's direction, making his robes flutter. Noah's eyes flickered uncontrollably at the sight of the gigantic and normal-sized figures. Then let me give you a grand introduction. Lezavim opened his arms and spoke loudly like a manipulator of many giant beasts. The one on our left is our Lord Glendale, who once fought the God-Slayer himself. Ha 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 ha. Glendale's eyes as he stared at Noah. Human, we meet again. This time, let us have the most tragic battle. It was none other than Glendale who was once beaten to a pulp by Noah. Next to our Lord Glendale is the guardian of the Golden Apple, who was defeated by the great hero Hercules in Greek mythology. Lezavim pointed to an evil dragon next to Glendale. The evil dragon born by the king of monsters, Typhon-laden. An evil dragon made of wood with multiple heads, which perfectly fit the image of a wood dragon, suddenly looked at Noah with great interest. Is that the legendary god slayer? I wonder if he can break my barrier and defense? Next to our Laden is the legendary black dragon that lives in northern Europe. Even if he's killed, he'll be resurrected in the end. He might even survive the twilight of the gods. And he dares to gnaw on the world tree. Lezavim introduced with great interest. The evil dragon that's full of greed, and will devour everything in sight. Nidhogg. An evil dragon with black scales and an earthen yellow abdomen that was more than 20 meters long and had 4 limbs and dragon wings also looked at Noah. Disgusting saliva flowed out of the corner of his mouth. Although he's just a human, he looks quite tasty. Next is the most powerful evil dragon. Everyone is afraid of him. Even the gods are afraid of him, Lord Dragon. Lezavim's voice was getting louder and louder. In Egyptian mythology, he's the embodiment of chaos and destruction that tried to engulf the entire world in darkness. Apophis. In front of the 3 gigantic evil dragons, Glendale, Radon, and Nidhogg, a handsome young man with brown skin and priest-like attire lifted his eyes and looked at Noah. The corners of his mouth slowly curled into a smile. I've always wanted to see the legendary Godslayer. Today my wish is finally fulfilled. Next, there's no need for me to introduce you. The evil dragon lord, who has already met our Godslayer once, has also made his grand entrance. Lezavim shouted as if he was shocked by himself, but in fact he was very happy. That's the Godslayer from Celtic mythology. He wasn't resurrected by the Holy Grail. He's the dark dragon that's still alive. Clon Kvotch. Yes. Next to Apophis, Clon Kovac appeared. His coat was gone, and his upper body was bare. His eyes, one gold and one black, turned to Noah, and a smile appeared on his face. I've fought the White Dragon Emperor, but he's still no match for me. That's why I've come to find you. Just as Noah expected. Even if Varley developed the Tyrannosaurus without any side effects, he still couldn't defeat Clon Kvotch, who had reached the level of a sky dragon. Under such circumstances, the smile on Lezavim's face grew wider and wider. Behind him, an evil dragon that was smaller than Glendale, Radon, and Nidhogg, but it had 3 heads. Its skin was pitch black, its eyes were crimson red, and it had a pair of dragon wings on its back. It was an evil dragon that was smaller than Glendale, Radon, and Nidhogg. This evil dragon lord is very obvious, so obvious that I don't need to introduce him. The Deicide should know him, right? Lezawim grinned. He's as famous as our Clon Kvotch and Apophis. Together, they're known as the strongest evil dragon. He's the infamous evil dragon in the sect of Fire Azzy-Dahaka. Under Lezavim's call, the 3-headed demonic dragon laughed ferociously. Ah, so this is the Godslayer? It doesn't feel any different from other humans. No different. No different. Azzy-Dahaka's 3 heads seemed to have their own thoughts. They spoke separately, giving off a rather strange feeling. In addition, its skin was an ominous pitch-black color, not the pure white color that Noah had imagined. The 3-headed demonic dragon in front of him was completely different from the 3-headed demonic dragon that Noah had encountered in the box. How is it? How is it? Lezavim smiled cheerfully as if he was anticipating Noah's shock and fear. Uncle, my lineup of helpers is luxurious enough, right? Great evil dragon lord's great discount. Dark dragon of the new moon Clon Kvotch. Forbidden dragon of the mana source, Azzy-Dahaka. The primordial dark nether dragon Apophis. The Tyrannosaurus of great sin Grendel. Guardian dragon of the treasured tree Laden. Dead dragon of the law Nidhogg. Almost all of the legendary evil dragons of various mythological systems were present. This frighteningly powerful lineup surrounded Lezawim, and their gazes were all focused on Noah. Waves of terrifying auras rose from the evil dragons one after another, and as if gravity had materialized, they fiercely suppressed the entire space. Chapter 1920. Roar, 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 roar. Earth-shattering roars came from the mouths of the evil dragons. When they mixed together, it vaguely felt like the roars of 10,000 beasts, which was very shocking. Looking at the happy Lezavim, the expressionless Lilith, and the roaring evil dragons, Noah had to admit that this lineup was really quite amazing. Lezavim was the son of the Demon King who shared the title of Surpasser with Syzax and Achuka. Lilith was half of Orpheus and had half of Orpheus' power. Although the dragon god's infinite had become limited, because of the division of power, resulting in a drop in strength that was far more than half, even so, Orpheus still exceeded 4 digits, and was between 3 and 4 digits. He was much more powerful than the other top 10 existences in the world. Presumably Lilith was the same, right? As for those evil dragons, they were existences that turned the world upside down in their respective myths and legends. Glendale, Radon, and Nidhogg were definitely Dragon King level evil dragons, which were stronger than the average Demon King level evil dragons. Even Azazel was not confident of winning against them. Azazel, Dahaka, and Apophis were even more so. They were as famous as Clone Kuva and were known as the strongest evil dragons. They were only below the heavenly dragon level and were comparable to gods. As for Clone Kuva, he had surpassed himself and reached the heavenly dragon level through continuous training. Even Wally, who had developed the Tyrannosaurus Rex, was defeated in a head-on confrontation. With such a lineup, not to mention dealing with one person, it was definitely enough to deal with a mythical force. It was believed that even a top 10 powerhouse in the world would not be able to survive against such a lineup. Although Noah was ranked second among the top 10 powerhouses in the world, with his current strength, he could not face such a terrifying lineup alone. Without the use of another cosmology, the star map of creation, another cosmology. Therefore, looking at the shocking lineup, Noah suddenly laughed. Good. Very good. Noah's voice echoed very clearly in the surroundings. Since all of you are here, that's great. As soon as he finished speaking, clang! A burst of bright starlight burst out from Noah's body. As long as I get rid of all of you, I'll be done once and for all. As Noah's voice rang out and the resplendent starlight surged, waves of berserk power gushed into Noah's body like streams of turbulence. Buzz! Suddenly, the aura on Noah's body gradually swelled. With a shocking momentum, it soared crazily. In the blink of an eye, it was above everyone else. All of the evil dragons present abruptly stopped breathing, and their roars came to an abrupt halt. Even the expressionless Lilith couldn't help but widen her eyes slightly, and her petite body subconsciously tensed up. On the other hand, Lezavim stared closely at Noah, who was bursting with a terrifying aura like a demon god. The smile on his face gradually disappeared, and a frightening look flashed across his eyes. So that's how it is. So this is the almost invincible another cosmology that can imitate any object other than humans and absorb the opponent's power for its own use. Although it's a bit strange for me to say it, it's indeed a foul power. It's so foul that it makes people want to curse their mothers. Lezavim laughed again. However, I'm not unprepared. After saying that, Lezavim raised his hand. On that hand, a cup with a golden luster floated in midair, emitting an unusually dense holy aura. That's... Noah was stunned, and then his face sank. That's the Sephortha's cup? That's right. Lezavim laughed frivolously. Uncle, I took this holy cup out of the original owner's body. How about it? Are you surprised? More than a month ago, after Noah revealed his true trump card, his another cosmology was no longer a secret. In that case, it was impossible for Lezavim not to prepare a countermeasure. With the holy cup, even if the evil dragon lords are killed, I can continue to revive them. If you keep killing, I'll keep reviving. In that case, even if we can't win, we won't lose, right? Lezavim said with a smile. At that time, the Godslayer and the evil dragon lords will be able to fight until the end of the world. They will destroy this castle, this city, and even this vampire kingdom. How many vampires will be sacrificed at that time? 10? 100? 1,000? Or all of them will die? Lezavim clapped his hands and cheered. Just thinking about it makes one's blood boil. The bright starlight and violent aura that rose from Noah's body suddenly froze. Is this your goal? Noah looked at Lezavim, his eyes flashing with coldness and anger. Using the entire vampire world as a hostage? I can't help it. The Godslayer is so scary that even the various mythological forces are afraid of you. Since I want to go against you, I have to use a little trick. Lezavim grinned. But I have the demeanor of a bad guy, right? That's not bad, right? Who asked me to be a bad demon? La 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 la. At this moment, Noah really felt that his limits were being challenged. Originally, he thought that with his current state of mind, no matter how others provoked him, he wouldn't be easily angered and fall into the trap of others. But Lezavim was like the crystallization of malice. It was as if he existed specifically to challenge other people's bottom line. It really made people angry. This guy was a bastard. Noah clearly understood this point. At this moment, Lezavim suddenly changed the topic. How about this, God Slayer? You don't use that another cosmology, and I won't use the Sephiroth's cup. Let's have a good fight, how about that? Hearing this, Noah was stunned. Then he understood something and laughed sarcastically. No wonder you use so much nonsense to pave the way. So that's the reason. Noah raised his head and cast his gaze on the evil dragons that were looking at him with violent and aggressive eyes. He sneered as if he was talking to himself. No matter how well prepared you are, these legendary-level evil dragons are known for being dangerous and uncontrollable. They all want to have a good fight with me, so it's possible that they aren't under your control. That's why you're using such a clumsy method to limit my power and satisfy them, right? The smile on Lezavim's face froze again. Obviously, Noah's guess was right. To Lezavim, Noah's another cosmology was a huge threat. However, to these evil dragons, it would only arouse their fighting spirit. However, against Noah who used the another cosmology, these evil dragons would lose no matter how strong they were. Therefore, to prevent the evil dragons from losing control and challenging Noah, which would lead to another great defeat for the disaster squad, Lezavim could only use this method to limit Noah's power. This way, both sides would not have to use their trump cards, and it would satisfy the evil dragon's fighting spirit. Why not? As for losing? As long as Noah did not use the another cosmology, with such a lineup, how could the disaster squad lose? That was indeed the case. However, Lezavim had miscalculated something. All right. I agree to your conditions. Noah's gaze swept across the evil dragons, and the corners of his mouth slowly rose. But who is my opponent? Don't tell me you're all planning to come at me together? Lord Evil Dragons? With that one sentence, the atmosphere of the scene changed completely. Chapter 1921. If he wanted to go against Noah, he had to at least find a way to deal with his another cosmology. Although this idea was simple, it was the most correct one. If he did not find a way to deal with Noah's another cosmology, then other than humans, no matter how many other beings came, they would not be able to win against Noah. However, how could the so-called another cosmology be so easy to deal with? It was a power that was above the 3 digits of the box court, and was equal to the 2 digits. If this kind of power was so easy to deal with, then Az Dakaha, who had transformed into a human in the final trial, would not have been a threat to the entire box court. Even the War God Council had to collectively descend from the heavens to become a human, and drop their own spiritual level to put a seal on his shoulders and head. Since strength alone could not deal with it, then Lezavim could only think of a way to deal with Noah. The only way to make Noah hesitate and not use the another cosmology was to make it so that Noah wouldn't attack Noah for fear of breaking the vases. In view of this, Lezavim used the Holy Grail as a condition, and the entire vampire kingdom as a hostage to force Noah to give up on using the another cosmology. Unfortunately, although Lezavim was thinking of ways to deal with Noah, he forgot that there were many uncertainties in his own camp. The uncontrollable evil dragons were one thing, but their self-esteem was another. Lezavim had obviously forgotten. For these extremely dangerous and extremely battle-thirsty evil dragons, was it possible for them to join forces to deal with a human? The answer was naturally no. Are you kidding me? Glendale was the first to speak. How can we attack together? I'll go alone. I personally agree that we can't attack together, Radon retorted in a flat tone. But, you've already fought with the God Slayer, so it should be me next. Who would give it to you? Nidhogg was drooling as he roared crazily. That's my food, no one is allowed to take it from me. That should have been my line. Azidahaka exclaimed. That's my prey, I'll tear anyone who dares to snatch it from me. Tear him apart. Tear him apart. The other two heads of Dahaka also shouted. Their words sounded like a child's nonsense, but it gave off an extremely dangerous feeling, as if he could really do it. Under such circumstances, Crone Kovac frowned and said, I also want to fight the current Red Dragon Emperor. But just like Glendale, you fought him before, right? Apahis smiled. Since that's the case, I can't give it to you. Hearing this, Clon Kuvak's frown deepened. I still have a debt to settle with that human. Glendale looked at the surrounding evil dragons, and a dangerous glint appeared in his eyes. Are you trying to stop me? What? Do you want to fight? Layden laughed in a low voice. Have you thought it through? You who are good at attacking and I who are good at defending have very poor compatibility, right? You can't beat me, can you? I'm best at eating. Nidhogg raised his head and bared his teeth as he spoke. Whoever dares to snatch food from me, be prepared to be eaten by me first. So you're saying that the evil dragons have to fight to determine the winner? Dahaka pursed his lips. That's not bad, although you're not my match. We're not your match. We're not your match. Dahaka's other two heads were simply adding insult to injury, and it angered Glendale, Layden, and Nidhogg. However, it had to be said that Dahaka's words were correct. In terms of strength, as one of the strongest evil dragons, Dahaka was only below the Sky Dragon. He was far stronger than Glendale, Layden, and Nidhogg. Clon Kovac and Apophis, on the other hand, laughed. If the winner can fight the Red Dragon Emperor, then I don't mind. I can also play along and leave the Godslayer for last. It's not bad to deal with the competition around me first. As expected, although they looked very rational, Crone Kovac and Apahis were both evil dragons and were very dangerous. Alright. Glendale was so angry that he laughed. If that's the case, then let's fight first. The winner can fight that human. Glendale's disregard for the difference in strength caused the atmosphere among the evil dragons to turn frightening. Wait. What's the situation now? Lezavim reacted and hurriedly spoke. I say, evil dragon lords. Why do you have to fight amongst yourselves now of all times? What's wrong, Prince? Layden glanced at Lezavim. Do you want to interfere? I advise you not to interfere. Nidhogg stuck out his tongue and licked the corner of his mouth. I haven't tasted the Demon King's son, so don't force me to eat you. Such an arrogant statement made Lezawim's expression turn ugly, but he still smiled apologetically. Since one of you is fighting, all of you are fighting. Why don't you all come at me together? Why don't you all fight first? Hearing Lezwium's words, the surrounding air turned chilly. The evil dragons immediately looked at Lezavim with pity in their eyes. As expected, you're just the Demon King's son in the end? Apahis said calmly. You don't even know the most basic honor and self-respect. No wonder the demon realm is now ruled by the two surpassers, Sarzax Gimli and Achuka Astalot, and not you, the demon prince of planet Chiming. The evil dragon's pitiful gazes and Apahis's disdain made Lezavim's expression contort. Who cares so much about you? Lezavim roared furiously and raised the Holy Grail floating above his palm. Your lives are now in my hands. You were all revived by the Holy Grail. If I stop the Holy Grail, you will all die. Do you want to die? All of the evil dragons fell silent upon hearing this. Tih, as Dahaka clicked his tongue, as if he had completely lost interest. I thought I could have a good fight with the Godslayer, but it turned out like this. Boring. Forget it, go and play by yourselves. I won't keep you company. I won't keep you company. I won't keep you company. After saying that, as Dahaka activated a teleportation formation below him, and left without hesitation, Lezavim was dumbfounded. He left. He left just like that? What was this? While Lezavim was still in a daze, Apahis spoke in an equally cold tone. I won't keep you company either. You can fight among yourselves. A similar teleportation array appeared beneath Apahis, and he disappeared without a trace. Wait. Lezavim's eyes widened. Then Clon Kovac also turned around. I won't be restrained by the Holy Grail. I'm only moving with you to fight against the strong. Since you can't satisfy me, I'll act on my own from now on. After saying that, Klon Kovacs disappeared. One of the strongest evil dragons had left Lezivim's camp. As for the remaining 3 evil dragons, they were even more direct. Didn't you want to fight with him? I'll let you have him. Glendale. I hope you can win, Your Highness. Radon. You made me lose my appetite. Fortunately, there's still half of that giant monster left. It's just enough to fill my stomach. Nidhogg. After saying that, Glendale, Radon, and Nidhogg disappeared in a flash of light from the teleportation formation. You bastards. Lezawim finally came back to his senses and cursed out loud in rage. Who gave you permission to leave? All of you return. Before he could finish his sentence, a flash of light pierced through the space and swept past Lezavim's body. Splat. Along with a tearing sound, an arm was thrown into the air with crimson blood spurting out. The smell of blood filled the air. Chapter 1922. Poochie. When the tearing sound was clearly heard in the space, thick blood splattered everywhere, and an arm flew into the air before falling to the ground. Lezavim was completely stunned. Looking at the familiar arm that fell in front of him, Lezavim seemed to have lost his soul. He turned his head blankly and looked in the direction of his arm. However, the arm was long gone. Crimson blood continuously flowed out from the cut and dyed Lezavim's body red. Lezavim finally understood. His arm had been cut off. At the same time, an unimaginable pain struck Lezavim's mind. Lezavim's face twisted. Gawa dash. In the next moment, a series of painful screams resounded in this space. F***ck. 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 Lezawim held his broken arm and screamed. He raised his head hysterically and stared ahead with his bloodshot eyes. There, Noah slowly retracted his arm that fluctuated with rich divine power and laughed. Is this all you've got after losing your helper? There was sarcasm and disappointment in the laughter. The sarcasm was, of course, directed at Lezavim's unbearable performance. The disappointment was also directed at Lezavim's performance. Disregarding his personality, in terms of strength alone, this guy could not be compared to Sazax and Achuka. Sazax and Achuka, these 2 surpassers, were powerful enough to enter the top 10 in the world. As for Lezavim, although he was also a surpasser and his strength had surpassed the average Demon King level, he was at most on the same level as Michael and Asashel. He was probably on par with Chow Chow. Even if he could enter the 4 digits, he would only be at the bottom and could not be compared to Sazax and Achuka. With Noah's current strength, not to mention another cosmology, even if he did not use divine artifacts and elven devices, he had a high chance of defeating Lezavim. For a surpasser who was as famous as Sazax and Achuka, this level was too low. Just like what Apophis said, it was no wonder that Sazax and Achuka were the rulers of the demon realm. It was not only because Lezavim did not have the personality and state of mind of Sazax and Achuka, but also because Lezavim did not have the terrifying strength of Sazax and Achuka. Also, you've overestimated yourself. Noah lifted his feet and walked toward Lezavim step by step. Not only did you revive a legendary evil dragon to replenish your combat power, but you even tried to use the Holy Grail to control the evil dragons. Those evil dragons are dangerous existences that even their respective mythical organizations, and they are even willing to destroy them. You, as the son of a demon king, you want to control of so many evil dragons? You're overestimating yourself. Noah slowly raised a hand. Didn't you tell me not to use another cosmology? Then you'll die like this. As soon as his voice fell, thick spears of light suddenly flashed around Noah, turned into flashes of light, and shot toward Lezavim like a storm. Lilith. Lezavim's expression changed drastically, and he shouted without thinking. Hurry up and protect me. Just as the rain of light spears was about to land on Lezawim's body, a petite figure appeared in front of him, and extended a hand towards the thick light spears that were shooting towards him. A wave of power reverberated from the petite hand, and like ripples in a lake, it swept through the spears of light. Under the power wave, the spears of light that were shooting out like a storm suddenly stopped in mid-air, and then suddenly dissipated without any warning, disappearing without a trace. Lezavim. Protect. Lilith withdrew her hand and stood in front of Lezavim. Protect. Lezavim. That's right, protect me. Lezavim breathed a sigh of relief and nodded repeatedly. Just protect me. As expected of the dragon sister that I regard as my trump card, you're awesome. Hearing Lezavim's vulgar and unbearable speech, Noah frowned deeply and turned his gaze to Lilith. That person is not worthy of your protection. Noah stared at Lilith and said word by word. Come to me, Lilith, this is where you should be. Lilith blinked and suddenly hesitated. F***ck. What are you hesitating for? Lezavim said in exasperation. Don't hesitate. It's your job to protect me. It's the meaning of your birth. If you don't protect me, then there's no need for you to exist. Protect. Meaning. Lilith's young and pretty face returned to its original state as if all emotions were erased. Lilith. Protect Lezavim. That's my job. Is it? Noah closed his eyes. When he opened them again, his eyes were filled with an extremely cold calmness. In that case, even if I have to use force, I'll make you leave that lowly demon king's son. The divine power circulating in Noah's body suddenly transformed into magic power. Clang! A burst of brilliant white light bloomed from Noah's body. Like a tide, it surged to the surroundings, covering everything in the surroundings. Clang! In the royal city of Capes, in a corner of a castle, a flash suddenly penetrated the wall and bloomed from it. Bang! Accompanied by a muffled explosion, the wall covered by the brilliant white light exploded, turning into pieces of equal squares. Under the impact, it exploded in all directions like a bullet fired from a gun. Among them, Lilith's body was shrouded in a black crystal-like protective shield. While protecting Lezavim, she retreated from the brilliant flash and rushed into the sky. That bastard God-slayer, he actually dared to do it. Lezavim's face was distorted. Obviously, he was extremely angry. However, Lezavim also knew how terrifying Noah was if they really fought. Even the mythical forces didn't dare to go against him. What could Lezavim, a little demon king's son, do? If it weren't for Lilith here, Lezavim was afraid that he would have run away in terror. If you force me into a corner, I'll slaughter the entire vampire territory. Lezavim cursed and immediately took out the Holy Grail. Above the Holy Grail, bursts of sacred waves spread and shrouded Lezavim. His face that had turned pale due to the loss of blood from his broken arm gradually recovered its rosy color. Meanwhile, Lezavim's severed arm suddenly wriggled, and at a speed visible to the naked eye, flesh and blood rapidly grew out. It didn't take long for Lezavim's arm to recover. Boom! But at the same time, in the castle below, the sound of the ground being stepped on heavily resounded. Whoosh! A figure soared into the sky at an astonishing speed, like a rocket, and shot towards Lezavim's direction. Protect. Lezavim. Lilith immediately stretched out one of her hands toward the figure that was shooting toward her. A terrifying power fluctuated in her hand. However, a burst of bright starlight flickered in the space. Under the illumination of the starlight, the power fluctuating in Lilith's hand gradually melted like white snow. Lilith was stunned. You? Lezavim yelled out. Didn't you say that you won't use another cosmology? As soon as Lezavim's voice fell, a sneer entered his ears. That's on the condition that you won't use the Holy Grail. But didn't you use the Holy Grail? The figure that rose into the sky rushed in front of Lezavim. Of course, you're not worthy of me using another cosmology. I'm using it to deal with Lilith. To deal with trash like you, a fist is enough. The fist whistled through the air and imprinted itself into Lezavim's eyes that were filled with horror. Chapter 1923. Dong. In the sky above the royal city, a muffled sound rang out like a clap of thunder. It even turned into an echo that rippled through the entire sky. Whoosh! A figure immediately fell like a falling meteorite, rubbing against the air as it shot down with a sharp piercing sound. After which, it heavily landed on a building. Bang! The powerful impact caused the rather magnificent building to explode as if it was hit by a cannonball, stirring up gravel and debris all over the sky. As for the falling figure, it was completely covered by a large pile of gravel and debris, and the figure could no longer be seen. Lezavim. Lilith witnessed this scene with her own eyes, and a dazed and confused expression appeared on her young and pretty face. Protect. Lezavim. If Lilith still had strength now, she should immediately rush to the side of the target to protect, right? However, at this moment, a layer of bright starlight had been shrouding Lilith's body, constantly offsetting the power fluctuating from Lilith's body, causing Lilith to almost lose the most basic flight ability. Under such circumstances, Lilith couldn't use her strength at all, so her expression was so dazed and confused. However, at this moment when Lilith was at a loss and confused, a hand quietly stretched out and embraced her. "I'm sorry, Lilith. Please behave yourself for the time being." With Lilith in his arms, Noah lowered his gaze and looked at the shattered and collapsed building below. "After this is over, I'll take you to see the other you." The other Lilith, the other Lilith. Lilith raised her small head, looked at Noah, and finally quieted down after muttering a few times. Noah breathed a sigh of relief. No matter what, at least he had to deal with Lilith first. This little girl who is more ignorant and innocent than Orpheus. If she continues to follow a bastard like Lezavim, no matter who it is, they will go crazy, right? Fortunately, Lilith didn't seem to be controlled by Lezavim. She was just like Orpheus in the past, being used in a state of ignorance. So, as long as he got her back, everything would be fine. Of course, Lilith was the half-body of the dragon god created by Lezavim with half of Orpheus' power. No one knew if that despicable guy, Lezavim, would leave any backup plan on Lilith. With this in mind, Noah fully activated the power of Avesta, and let the power of another cosmology directly wrap around Lilith, constantly offsetting Lilith's power. In this way, even if Lezavim left any backup plan on Lilith, without power, it couldn't be used. Although Noah could not use the power of another cosmology on other objects because of the activation effect, in this situation, Noah could not use the power of another cosmology on other objects. However, if the opponent was Lezavim, as mentioned earlier, it wouldn't be a big deal even if he didn't use another cosmology. Compared to Lezavim, Lilith's power, Lilith Bang. At this time, in the center of the ruins below, 12 huge black pillars suddenly sprang out. Like a windmill, they stirred up the surrounding rubble, causing a violent shock wave, causing the area that was filled with rubble to be cleared in an instant. In the center of the 12 huge black pillars, Lezavim, who was covered in blood, stood up shakily, letting the 12 huge black pillars stretch out and retract behind him. The bodies of the 12 huge black pillars were 12 pitch-black wings. Like bats, they only belonged to demons. The Jumanli's dependents also had such wings. They were just like the white wings of angels and the black wings of fallen angels. They were characteristics that only belonged to demons. However, among the Jumanli's dependents, even Lyath, who came from a pure-blooded demon family, only had one pair of wings. As for Lezavim, he was like Asashel and Michael. He had 6 pairs of 12 wings, which meant that he had reached the highest level of demons. From this point of view, Lezavim's noble bloodline that he directly inherited from Lucifer did not go to waste. It was a pity that this son of the Demon King, who was the noblest existence in the demon realm, was in a sorry state at this moment. Even if he spread out his 12 wings, he still could not change anything. Clang! The Holy Grail floating around him released holy waves, constantly repairing Lezavim's injured body. As a divine tool that could subvert the principle of life, and even resurrect completely destroyed existences, the ability to heal was just a side effect. In the blink of an eye, the wounds on Lezavim's body were completely healed. Noah could not help but be speechless. Should I really deal with that Holy Grail first? However, Noah was still a little hesitant about making a move on the Holy Grail, because the Holy Grail was not a divine tool that belonged to Lezavim, but it was taken out by Lezavim from the original owner. Taking out the divine tool from the original owner was a technology developed by the fallen angel faction led by Asashel. It was no longer a secret now. However, if the divine tool was taken out, the original owner would die. However, if the divine tool could be put back into the owner's body, then the owner might be able to be resurrected. If the Holy Grail was destroyed, then the owner of the Holy Grail would really die. Of course, the original owner of the Holy Grail was not related to Noah, so Noah did not have to worry at all. But looking at Gasper's reaction to the owner of the Holy Grail before, Noah was sure that if that person really died, then Gasper would probably be in so much pain that he would rather die. Moreover, the divine tool was originally just a kind of power. Even if it was destroyed, it could be repaired. In that case, I can only snatch it. Just as Noah planned to do so, and was about to rush in the direction of Lezavim, there was a sudden change. Wong. A huge burst of magic power turned into a whirlwind-like impact. It suddenly rushed from a distance and swept in the direction of Noah. Noah's figure suddenly paused, and he turned around directly. Facing the violent manna that was sweeping towards him, he extended one of his hands, and a brilliant white light flickered on it. Bang! As soon as the violent magic power that swept in like a whirlwind fell on Noah's hand, it immediately exploded under the effect of magic crush. At the same time, a figure suddenly flashed beside Lezavim. Your Highness Lezavim. Euclid helped Lezavim up. Are you okay? Do I look okay to you? Lezavim pushed Euclid away violently and looked at Noah with a twisted face. Damn Godslayer. Your Highness Lezavim. It seems that we have slightly underestimated the Godslayer. Euclid said in a deep voice. Even all the mythical forces can't do anything to him. It's not enough to deal with him with just this level of preparation. Anyway, the most important thing is the Holy Grail. Let's retreat first. Lezavim suddenly glared at Euclid. Euclid stepped forward without fear, and said this sentence. If we fail here, then everything we've done before will be for naught. Does that not matter? Lezavim's expression suddenly changed. He looked up and saw Lilith in Noah's arms in midair. Lezavim gritted his teeth with hatred. Let's go. Go. Noah's eyes flashed with a touch of sharpness. Do you think you can leave? Lezavim was suddenly anxious. Euclid, on the other hand, smiled faintly. Lord Noah, instead of wasting your time here, why don't you hurry and take a look outside? Maybe we can save the vampire kingdom? Save. Noah was stunned. Taking advantage of this time, Euclid activated a teleportation magic array and enveloped himself and Lezavim. Remember this. Godslayer. Lezavim stared at Noah. One day, I'll make you pay for what you've done. Lezavim and Euclid left this sentence and disappeared into the teleportation magic array. Noah's eyes flashed. After a while, he took a deep breath, turned around, and rushed out of the Opesh royal city. Chapter 1924. When Noah flew out of Opesh royal city and arrived in midair above the vampire city, the scene that appeared in front of him made his expression change. Roar, roar, roar. He saw huge black shadows flying back and forth in the sky above the vampire city, letting out deafening roars. The main body of the black shadows was a giant dragon that had a pitch-black luster. The giant dragon was filled with an evil and ominous aura, and there was no rationality in its eyes. It was completely engulfed by madness and ferocity. One after another, these pitch-black dragons appeared from all directions. As they circled in the air, they raised their heads and roared. Then they spat out scorching flames at the city below. Boom, 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 boom. Accompanied by a series of explosions, the buildings were destroyed by the flames that fell from the sky one after another. They were all set ablaze and turned into ruins in an instant. Dragons! The dragons are here. Run! In the city, the residents of the vampires rushed out of the buildings one after another. They screamed in panic and fled in panic, falling into an unprecedented chaos. Under such circumstances, the pitch-black giant dragons spewed scorching flames at the city below mercilessly, destroying the buildings one by one. It was as if they were the embodiment of destruction and destruction. In the blink of an eye, the entire city turned into a sea of fire. The beautiful snowy scene from before disappeared without a trace under the ravaging of the pitch-black dragons. What's going on? Noah exclaimed in shock. What's going on? Noah wasn't shocked that the vampire city was suffering a disaster. What truly shocked Noah was the huge number of pitch-black dragons. Are those all evil dragons? Noah couldn't believe it. Since when were there so many evil dragons? Compared to the legendary evil dragons like Glendale, Radon, and Nidhogg, the aura of these evil dragons was unbelievably weak. let alone the strongest evil dragons like Klon Kowak, Az Dahaka, and Apophis. However, even if they could not compare to the legendary evil dragons, each of these evil dragons had the strength of an intermediate evil demon. To Noah, this level of power was not much different from nothing, but there were too many of them. Therefore, even though the people living in the city were not normal humans, but vampires, they could only flee in panic under the onslaught of the evil dragons. However, the vampires could not escape the city at all. This was because there was a crystal-like barrier surrounding the city, preventing all vampires and evil dragons from leaving. If this continued, not only would the vampire city be destroyed, but all the vampires here would also die from the evil dragon's breath. At that time, the number of casualties could not be described as heavy. Just as Noah was feeling shocked and puzzled, a figure shot over from afar. Noah immediately looked over and recognized the newcomer. The newcomer was none other than a Sashal. With 12 pitch-black wings on his back, a Sashal flew over from a direction and arrived in front of Noah. "You've finally appeared." A Sashal grabbed Noah's hand and said hurriedly, "Quick! Use the power of your another cosmology to cancel out that barrier. Otherwise, the vampires won't be able to escape. The Jimenez's followers won't be able to go to the Camilla faction to help." With this short sentence, Noah understood. It was not only Cape's side, but even Camilla's side had been attacked by the evil dragons. A barrier? Noah raised his head and looked at the crystal-like barrier in the sky. Is this the evil dragon Radon's doing? Other than the evil dragon who once guarded the golden apple in Greek mythology and was extremely good at barriers and defense, who else could create a barrier that even a Sashal could not do anything about? That barrier was not only to prevent the vampires from escaping, but also to prevent the people here from assisting the Camilla faction. It was also set up to make the evil dragons stay here obediently and wreak havoc. That's why it was set up, isn't it? At that moment, Noah raised his hand towards the barrier in the sky. However, he did not use the another cosmology to cancel it out like a Sashal said. Instead, he activated a huge magic array. Immediately after, Noah poured all of the shatter magic into the magic array, causing the magic array to suddenly flash with a dazzling white light and illuminate the surroundings. The next moment, a shatter light beam shot up into the sky and violently shot towards the horizon. Bang dash! Following the sound of glass shattering, the shatter light beam that landed heavily on the crystal-like barrier suddenly penetrated it. Kacha! Kacha kacha! Immediately, the barrier began to crack. In an instant, the entire barrier was filled with cracks. Bang dash! In the next second, the barrier was completely shattered in the midst of an explosion and disappeared into the sky. Great! A Sashal was overjoyed and quickly activated a communication magic array and spoke into it. "Leah, take your kin and go help the Camilla faction." "Got it." Leah's voice sounded from the communication magic array, and then disappeared. "What's going on?" Noah asked at that moment. "Why are there so many evil dragons?" "Those evil dragons have just appeared." A Sashal gritted his teeth and spoke with resentment. "Not long ago, they were all vampires from the anti-government faction of Seeps." Vampires from the anti-government faction of Seeps? Noah was stunned at first, but then he understood. Were they transformed by the Holy Grail? The anti-government faction of Seeps was in cahoots with the Disaster faction, and shared the power of the Holy Grail. They were vampires who tried to use the Holy Grail to become flawless creatures. However, since the Holy Grail had fallen into Lezavim's hands, it proved that the anti-government faction of Seeps had all been abandoned by Lezavim. Since that was the case, with Lezavim's despicable character, it was not strange for him to secretly transform all the vampires into evil dragons using the excuse of using the Holy Grail to create flawless creatures. Now Euclid had released all the vampires that had been transformed into evil dragons, and let them wreak havoc in his city in order to contain Noah and escape with Lezavim. Thanks to this, the coup in the royal city is over, but a greater disaster is facing all the vampires. A Sashal clenched his fist. And from the vampires of Seeps, we learned that some vampires on Camilla's side were also tempted by the power of the Holy Grail, and tried to become flawless creatures. Those vampires have probably all turned into evil dragons, and are now wreaking havoc on Camilla's side? That was why Asashel had sent the Jamonli's vassals to save the situation. Looking at Asashel's furious expression, Noah sighed in his heart. Although he was the governor of the fallen angels, and an evil person recorded in the Bible, in reality, Asashel wanted to see peace more than anyone else. The disaster faction had turned the kingdom of the vampires into a purgatory. This scene fell into Asashel's eyes, so it was natural for him to be angry. Otherwise, Asashel would not have been so anxious to send the Jamonli's vassals to save the situation when the negotiations with Camilla failed. Of course, Noah himself would not leave them in the lurch. No matter how corrupt the higher-ups regime was, these ordinary vampires were innocent. Noah already understood this principle when he was in the world of the Dark Bullet. So Noah handed Lilith, who had been quiet in his arms, to Asashel. "Help me take care of this child." "This is..." Asashel subconsciously took it, but he was stunned by Lilith's appearance. Without giving Asashel time to be surprised, Noah took a step forward, and an amazing magic power rose from his body. Clang! A dazzling light flickered from Noah's body. It was not a soft white light that was as gorgeous as a powder, but a bright golden brilliance. "Activate!" Noah's voice resounded through the sky. Fairy Law. Chapter 1925. Clang! The dazzling brilliance was like a rising star at dawn. It flickered in the sky above the city that had turned into a sea of fire, illuminating the sky that was still filled with fog. What? Asashel, who was the closest to the light source, was caught off guard by the dazzling brilliance. He was shocked and hurriedly raised a hand in front of him to block the dazzling brilliance. However, Asashel sensed a terrifyingly powerful mana rising amidst the dazzling brilliance. Immediately after, the brilliance, which was mixed with a shocking amount of mana, rushed into the sky and into the clouds. Ding-dong! With a strange sound that was like the sound of a bell, an extremely exquisite and huge magic array suddenly appeared in the sky. It emitted a dazzling brilliance that illuminated the entire sky. The evil dragons that were wreaking havoc in the vampire city finally noticed the commotion. They were all attracted by it and looked in Noah's direction. However, it was too late to react. Under the exquisite and huge magic array in the sky, Noah's body was bathed in the dazzling brilliance. He clasped his hands together, and a small magic array appeared in his deep, dark eyes. The Fairy Law. Activate! The sound of judgment that shook the space turned into an echo that reverberated in the world. Suddenly, the dazzling brilliance turned into a surging wave that spread in all directions with Noah as the center. The evil dragons did not even have time to react before they were all engulfed by the dazzling brilliance and disappeared in the surging brilliance. The dazzling brilliance enveloped the rampaging evil dragons, the escaping vampires, and the burning city. At this moment, even the people on Camilla's side could clearly see the dazzling brilliance shining in Seep City. They were all captivated by it. After an unknown amount of time, the dazzling brilliance dimmed bit by bit. Sensing that the shocking magic power that was vibrating in the space was slowly dissipating, Asashel opened his eyes with lingering fear. However, as soon as he opened his eyes, the scene that appeared in front of him left him stunned. He saw that the evil dragons that were wreaking havoc in the vampire city, that had turned into a sea of fire, were lying all over the ground. The huge number of evil dragons had all collapsed in the time it took for Asashel to close his eyes and open them again. The vampires who were still running for their lives opened their eyes in horror. When they saw the evil dragons lying on the ground, they were all stunned and looked at each other in bewilderment. The entire place suddenly fell silent. Only the sound of flames burning was left. It was unusually strange. Only then did Noah let out a breath and turned his head to look at Asashel. "All right, give her to me." "Oh," Asashel responded as if he had lost his train of thought. He subconsciously passed Lilith to Noah, and then he realized what was going on, and his eyes widened. What was that just now? Magic? That's right. Noah nodded as he hugged Lilith, who had been quiet all this while. I didn't expect the magic that I had sealed away for a long time to come in handy at this time. The 3 super spells from the fairy tale had indeed been sealed away by Noah for a long time. That was because the 3 super spells had gradually become useless in Noah's hands. It was not that the 3 super spells were not powerful enough. On the contrary, with the support of Noah's endless mana, the power of the 3 super spells could be said to be astonishingly powerful. Unfortunately, the 3 super spells had a rather fatal flaw. That was, each of them required a certain amount of time to prepare. During that period of time, as Noah's power improved, they became more and more deadly. After all, the stronger Noah's power was, the higher the level of the battle he would be facing. It was often unknown how many rounds could be exchanged in a second in a high-level battle. Using a super spell that required such a long time to prepare was simply an act of suicide. Because of this reason, Makarov and Laxus, who also knew how to use the fairy law, would almost never use this super trial spell in high-level battles, unless they had the confidence to kill in one shot, and had sufficient time to prepare. Even Makarov and Laxus were like this, let alone Noah. Of course, Makarov and Laxus would not use the fairy law easily. That was also because once this super spell was used, regardless of whether it was successful or not, it would consume a large amount of mana. Of course, Noah did not have this problem, but his fighting ability was much stronger than Makarov and Laxus. The preparation time of the 3 super spells could be said to be a fatal flaw in his hands. In addition, other than the fairy law, the other 2 super spells also had other fatal flaws. The fairy glitter, a super killing spell, sometimes could not be used in other worlds because of the different positions of the sun, moon, and stars and the situation. Fairy sphere was an absolute defense spell that required a guild member's thoughts to gather its power. In other worlds where there were no guild members, it wouldn't be able to even freeze time. At most, it would be able to form a sturdy protective barrier. Coupled with the unavoidable extremely long preparation time. After becoming a god slayer, the 3 super spells were sealed by Noah and could no longer be used. However, while it was not good enough, it was better than bad. Leaving aside the fairy glitter and the fairy sphere, the fairy law was still very useful when it came to mowing the grass. It was just right to use it in such a situation. Don't worry, I only shook their minds. I did not directly destroy their minds, so they only fainted. Noah carried Lilith and flew forward. After that, you can do some research and see if there is a way to restore them. Hearing this, Asashel finally reacted. He looked at Noah with gratitude, and then flew directly to the city below. If Asashel left just like that, the vampires in the city would definitely skin the unconscious evil dragons, and pull out their tendons without knowing. So Asashel chose to stay. As for the Camilla faction, naturally, it was left to Noah. With that spell, numbers were meaningless to Noah. On the other side, Noah flew in the direction of the Camilla faction as fast as he could. After a few minutes of flying at full speed, he finally arrived above the Camilla faction. This place had also turned into a sea of fire. The roads, buildings, and environment were all mercilessly destroyed. Not even a trace of it was left. Under the burning of the flames, it gradually turned into ruins. One evil dragon after another soared through the air. Some were destroying the city. Some were chasing the residents. Some were fighting. This part of the world had completely turned into an incomparably tragic battlefield. Seeing this scene, Noah was just about to go forward when he suddenly saw a young girl sitting on the street surrounded by flames. How could this be? Elmine Shelton no longer had the arrogance from before. It was as if she had lost her soul. She looked at her hometown with eyes full of confusion and despair. How could this be? The noble girl who was proud of her bloodline and repeatedly claimed that there were no vampires who denied their way of life in the Camilla faction was now defeated by the cruel reality. What should I do? Elmine Shelton looked at the scene in front of her in despair. What should I do? A voice answered her. What you should do is to hurry and save your hometown, not sit there and watch. Elmine Shelton trembled, and quickly raised her head to look at the source of the voice. There, Noah had already turned into a stream of light and rushed forward. Chapter 1926. The fire that spread throughout the vampires' territory lasted until late into the night. It wasn't until the night fell that the flames gradually dimmed and disappeared. Along with the fire, The residences of the two major vampires, Sypesh and Camilla, also disappeared. Looking at the streets and the city that had been completely turned into ruins as if it had been attacked by artillery fire, and the charred remains of buildings everywhere, the Jumanli's kin fell into silence. How pitiful. Asashel looked around and sighed. This way, the vampires will have to live a hard life until everything is restored to its original state. After all, vampires were residents of the dark, and most of them were nocturnal creatures that could not be directly exposed to sunlight. Now that their residences had been turned into ruins, if they did not find a place to hide from the sun and settle down, the vampires would basically be doomed even if the evil dragons did not attack them. Moreover, the vampires had not been in contact with the outside world all this while, and had been hiding in their own residences and being complacent. Now that their residences had been destroyed, and because they had no contact with the outside world, the situation they faced was more difficult than imagined. If we lack resources for reconstruction, I can go back and talk to my father, Lyeth said. Maybe he can help. No need, I will ask for help from the major factions. Asashel scratched his head. Let the major factions bleed a little and provide some resources, so that the reconstruction work can go smoothly. Lyeth nodded and did not say anything else. In fact, Noah was also present. Seeing that Asashel and Lyeth had decided on the next course of action in a few words, Noah shrugged and spoke to Asashel. Looks like we should put the peace talks aside for the time being. Yeah, Asashel said helplessly. King Sypesh was seriously injured because of the coup and is still in a coma. However, Queen Camilla is probably in a terrible fix because of the evil dragon's attack, and has no time to participate in our peace talks with Sypesh. That's a blessing in disguise, isn't it? What about the vampires that were transformed into evil dragons? Noah asked. Has everything been arranged? I've already ordered my subordinates to capture all of those evil dragons. All that's left is to research them. Arthashel's eyes were filled with the excitement and happiness of a stubborn scientist. A creature transformed from the power of the god's destruction tool. If I study it properly, it might be able to improve my artificial god's artifact. Hearing this, Noah's body trembled, and he silently mourned for those fellows in his heart. Hopefully, they would not be dissected for research. However, even if they were dissected for research, those guys only had themselves to blame. Who asked those fellows to be in cahoots with the massive calamity? In the end, they were used and abandoned, turning into that ghastly appearance? He could only pray for the best. At this time, a young noble girl with two attendants slowly walked towards them. Everyone's gazes immediately turned to look at the newcomer. The newcomer was Elmaine Shelton. At this moment, the previously domineering and even somewhat condescending vampire girl no longer had her previous arrogance. She was like an injured little animal that had just recovered, but was still a little weak. She came in front of everyone, lifted her skirt, and bowed. I, on behalf of Queen Camilla, would like to express my gratitude to everyone for their help today. Looking at Elmaine Shelton's somewhat tired and weak expression, the group of Jumanli's followers looked at each other, then turned their gazes to Noah and Arthashel. Noah did not say anything, and only shrugged, leaving the right to speak to Arthashel. In response, Arthashel could only bitterly smile and take a step forward. After this, I will request the major forces that we have reached an agreement with to help the vampires rebuild their territories. If there's anything you need help with, don't hesitate to ask. Hearing this, Elmaine Shelton did not show any signs of gratitude. Instead, she lowered her head and remained silent. The atmosphere suddenly became a little strange. Everyone suddenly looked at each other, not understanding what was going on. Just as Arthashel frowned and was about to speak again, Elmaine Shelton suddenly asked, "Our negotiations with you have already broken down. Even if you're not enemies, you're definitely not friends. If that's the case, why would you want to help us? Not only did you save us, but you also intend to help us rebuild?" Arthashel and the Jumanli's followers were all stunned. On the other hand, Elmaine Sheridan shifted his gaze to Noah, and said in an extremely complicated tone, "Lord Noah, you're very powerful. We've all seen it. Even the evil dragon army that the entire vampire race is helpless against is as fragile as a piece of paper in your hands. If you're so powerful, if you really want to force us to reach an agreement, you have plenty of means to achieve your goal. Why didn't you do that, but instead went through the trouble of coming to the vampire kingdom and going through so much trouble to negotiate with the vampires? From Elmaine Shelton's tone, Noah not only heard the complicated emotions, but also a kind of confusion. Presumably, the destruction of her home and the betrayal of her companions should have brought a lot of blows to this prideful vampire girl, right? As a result, Elmaine Shelton no longer had the arrogance and haughtiness from before. Instead, he noticed some details and problems that he hadn't noticed before. That was Noah's approach and attitude. That was why Elmaine Shelton asked this question. Noah raised his eyes and met Elmaine Sherstein's gaze. After a long while he faintly said, "Don't worry about it. Because what we're after is peace." Hearing Zhang Tai's words, Elmaine Shelton's eyes rippled as he became completely speechless. That's right. Because what Noah was after was peace. Since he was after peace, there was no reason to force it. Even before, in front of the major mythical forces, Noah only chose to show his power. Whether or not to conclude a peace treaty was up to the mythical forces themselves to decide, and there was no coercion. Otherwise, if Noah really wanted to use forceful means to force the major forces to conclude a peace treaty, with the power of another cosmology, it was simply something that could be done easily. However, was such a forced peace really peace? That was just moving the battle on the surface to the dark. Not only was there no benefit, but there were only disadvantages, right? Noah would not do that kind of superficial work and lose the big picture for the small. And Noah's words also made Athathiel and the people of Jimenez's family look at each other and smile. Just like what teacher Noah said, what we're after is peace, not war, Lyeth said softly. Even if the negotiations break down, we won't leave your country in the lurch. Of course, what we hope to see is world peace, not just the safety of a single race. World peace cannot be achieved without a single person. Asashel looked at Elmaine Shelton. So, we also hope that the vampires can become our partners and work with us to maintain this peace. Elmaine Shelton's gaze swept over everyone. Seeing that there wasn't a trace of hypocrisy on their faces, he fell into silence once again. However, the perplexed expression on Elmaine Shelton's face disappeared little by little. I truly feel everyone's sincerity. For the first time, Elmaine Shelton showed a smile from the bottom of his heart. I will mention the peace treaty to Queen Camilla again, and let her reconsider. Athathiel and the people of Jimenez's family suddenly laughed, extremely happy. The corners of Noah's mouth could not help but curl up slightly, and his heart was suddenly enlightened. I hope that one day I can sit at the negotiating table with all of you again, and have a detailed discussion. Elmaine Shelton bowed. I also hope that one day I can usher in real-world peace with all of you. Everyone nodded with a smile. In the night sky, stars began to appear one after another. They shone brightly, bringing light and hope to the boundless darkness. Chapter 1927. Due to the coup d'état between the government and anti-government factions, the Seeps royal city, where the Seeps king lived, had become dilapidated and riddled with holes. There were traces of battle everywhere. Noah walked through the corridors that he had passed during the day, and he could see vampires bustling around him. The big commotion during the day had made the residents of the entire vampiric kingdom recognize Noah, the Godslayer. Therefore, along the way, every vampire would lower their heads and bow to Noah. Their expressions were very respectful, and even a little fearful. The terrifying power that Noah displayed made the vampires hold a contradictory attitude of respect and fear for Noah. In this regard, Noah did not care much and walked forward under the salutes and gazes of the vampires. In his hand, he was holding a petite girl in a dark dress. Of course it was Lilith. This little girl, who was more ignorant and innocent than Orpheus, now seemed to be completely captivated by Noah. One hand was tightly holding Noah, and no matter where Noah went, she followed him. The other hand was holding a lollipop, which she licked expressionlessly. That scene was simply like a little girl who had been abducted and bribed. Noah did not have this self-awareness at all. He took Lilith's hand with a matter-of-fact expression and came in front of a door. He reached out and knocked on the door. The next second, a Sashal's voice sounded from inside. "Come in." Hearing this, Noah pushed the door open and walked into the room. It was a very spacious and luxurious room. The floor was covered with soft carpets. Beautiful curtains hung on the four walls. There was a very gorgeous bed in the corner. At first glance, it looked like the boudoir of a princess, and it was very eye-catching. The only flaw was that there were no windows here. Except for a door that was connected to the outside, it was completely closed. However, this was also a characteristic of vampires, and there was nothing strange in the vampiric kingdom. At this moment, there were two people in the room. One was a Sashal, who was sitting on the edge of the bed, examining something. The other was a young girl. It was a young girl with waist-length hair that was not so much a resplendent golden color, as it was a rather peculiar color. The girl seemed to be around 20 years old. Her facial features were quite regular, just like Elmaine Shelton. She looked like a doll with an indescribable beauty. The difference was that the girl's skin wasn't unhealthy pale, but was as smooth and soft as a pearl, just like a human's. However, this beautiful girl was lying on the bed with her eyes closed as if she had fallen into eternal sleep. Her expression was extremely peaceful. Looking at the beautiful girl lying on the bed, Noah whispered, "Is this Valerie Tsepesh? Valerie Tsepesh?" The new king that Tsepesh advocated during the coup d'état, and also the holder of the godly Sephiroth's cup. She was a hybrid between a human and a vampire. In other words, it was not an exaggeration to say that she was the culprit who colluded with the group of disasters and stirred up the entire vampire world. At least, that was what Noah had always thought. However, not long ago, Noah found out that this girl was just a puppet. The real culprit who colluded with the group of disasters and attempted a coup d'état, severely injuring the king of Opesh and causing him to fall into a coma, and indirectly or directly stirring up the entire vampire world, was actually the Holy Grail holder's family of the same blood and origin. In the world of vampires, half-breeds had no status. Letting a mixed blood become a king was something that couldn't be allowed in the first place. Although Valerie inherited the bloodline of Tsepesh, she was a hybrid herself. It was impossible for a vampire to support her and let her become the new Tsepesh king. What's more, Tsepesh was originally a patriarchal clan. It was too ridiculous to let a woman become a king. Therefore, the real cause of the coup d'état was Valerie's relative of the same bloodline. After Valerie awakened the godly tool in her body, he deceived Valerie with flowery words and used the power of the Holy Grail to rope in a vampire clan that wanted to become a flawless creature. He secretly accumulated strength and cooperated with the group of disasters. From then on, Valerie's relative of the same bloodline was destined to be a tragedy, because he was just a tragic figure that was used by Lesavim. During the day, when Athasiel and Jimenez's subordinates barged in and came to Valerie, the Holy Grail in Valerie's body had already been taken away. Her relative of the same bloodline was torn in half by the evil dragon and died without a burial place. And Valerie started to fall into a state of suspended animation at that time. That's right. Suspended animation. Originally, if the godly tool in the body was taken away, the original owner of the godly tool should have died directly. However, Valerie did not die directly. She only fell into a state of suspended animation. Or it was not an exaggeration to say that she was in a state of deep sleep. What's going on? Noah looked at Athasiel. Why did Valerie Tsepesh not die directly after the godly tool was taken away? The reason is actually very simple. Athasiel seemed to be admiring and exclaiming at the same time. The Holy Grail that Lesavim took away is only a part of the godly tool in Valerie Tsepesh's body. It's not the whole thing. A part of the godly tool. Noah was stunned. You're saying that the Holy Grail in Lesavim's hands is only a part of the Sephiroth's cup? That's impossible, right? Undoubtedly, the Holy Grail that Noah saw in Lesavim's hands was complete. Moreover, the power was very complete. Even the evil dragons were completely resurrected. Lesavim even used the power of the Holy Grail twice to heal his injuries. Noah saw it clearly. In the end, That power was only a part of the Holy Grail? How was that possible? I thought it was impossible at first, but after carefully examining Valerie Tsepesh's body, I confirmed it. Athosiel met Noah's gaze and said word by word. There is not only one Holy Grail in Valerie Tsepesh's body, but there are a total of 3. They are the godly tools that have become subspecies since they were awakened. Subspecies? Noah completely understood. Valerie Tsepesh's Holy Grail had mutated. It became a subspecies. It was not a subspecies of the Forbidden Hand, but a subspecies of the artifact itself. Just like how a divine artifact might have a subspecies of Forbidden Hand that was completely different from the original Forbidden Hand, some divine artifacts might also mutate and become a divine artifact that was poles apart from the original artifact. That was the subspecies of the artifact itself. However, the probability of the latter subspecies appearing was much lower than the former subspecies. So far, there had not been more than 10 cases of subspecies appearing. As for the godly tool subspecies, it was almost unprecedented. The probability of its appearance was frighteningly low. In the end, there was only one here? I don't know if the person in charge knows about this. Only one of the 3 Holy Grails in Valerie Tsepesh's body was taken away. The remaining 2 still exist in her body, so the holder of the Holy Grail didn't die directly. Athosiel glanced in Valerie's direction. However, even if only a part of the artifact is taken out, it will greatly affect the holder. If the Holy Grail that was taken away is not found and reimplanted in her body, the little girl will probably never wake up. Hearing Athosiel's words, Noah fell into silence. Find the Holy Grail that was taken away? That was easier said than done. I've heard. Athosiel's expression became serious, and there was even a faint trace of resentment. The person currently leading the disaster squad is that bastard Lyran, right? That's right. Noah nodded. It's that surpasser who is as famous as Syzax and Achuka. However, this statement is too exaggerated. Wasn't it? Compared to Syzax and Achuka, Lezavim's strength was really far inferior. In this regard, Athosiel said this. Surpasser refers to surpassing in terms of race, not power. Although that bastard Lyran is much weaker than Syzax and Achuka, he also has abnormal abilities. Chapter 1928. It was not without reason that Lezavim was called a surpasser. Lezavim's strength was not good, but that was only from Noah's point of view. As well as when compared to Syzax and Achuka, the 2 foul existences. In fact, from an objective point of view, Lezavim was definitely worthy of the title of surpasser. First of all, Lezavim was the son of the demon king Lucifer and the mother of demons Lilith. His bloodline had already surpassed the category of demons. Even his demon wings had the highest grade of 12 pieces, which was the best among demons. Secondly, although Lezavim's strength was far from that of Syzax and Achuka, he was also beyond the level of the demon king. Even Asashel might not be his opponent. Therefore, whether it was in terms of bloodline or strength, Lezavim was worthy of the title of a surpasser. Most importantly, those who were known as surpassers all had extraordinary powers that demons could not possess. Syzax and Achuka were shown in terms of absolute strength. Lezavim was shown in terms of ability. The artifact is nullified. Any power, characteristics, and effects produced by the artifact are ineffective. As long as it is the power of the artifact, it cannot cause any harm, Asashel said. That man has such an ability that can nullify the power created by the God of the Bible, which is beyond the reach of the various mythical forces. This is what makes that guy special. Nullification of the artifact? Noah was slightly stunned. Lezavim still has such an ability? You didn't use the artifact when you fought with him, right? Asashel seemed to understand something. It's natural that you don't know. That ability is only effective on the artifact. If you didn't use the artifact, you naturally wouldn't have seen it. Fortunately, you are not a human like Chow Chow, who relies heavily on the power of the artifact. Otherwise, you would be in big trouble. Is that so? Noah looked at Asashel. What if it was an artificial artifact created by you? My artificial artifact. Arthashel did not expect Noah to ask such a question. He hesitated for a moment before shaking his head. It shouldn't work either. After all, my artificial divine artifact is a replica of a divine artifact. Since Lezavim's divine artifact is ineffective, and even the original can work, there's no reason why the replica won't work, right? That's true. Noah nodded, but then he remembered something. That's not right. If that guy had the ability to nullify divine equipment, then how could he make the Holy Grail work on him? Could it be that the ability could be controlled by oneself? But that's not right, is it? Noah couldn't help but recall a detail that he had overlooked before. When Lezavim took out the Holy Grail, he didn't touch it at all. Instead, he let the Holy Grail float in his palm or float around him. Did that mean that even Lezavim himself couldn't control that ability? Was it the type that would always be in effect? Once Lezavim touched the Holy Grail would stop functioning? But if that was the case, how could the Holy Grail work on Lezavim? Just as Noah was extremely puzzled, Draeger's voice sounded in Noah's mind. I think that the divine artifact nullification ability should be similar to a defensive mechanism. It can nullify the power of the divine artifact when it comes into contact with the son of the Demon King, but it can't nullify the targeted ability, right? What does that mean? The Holy Grail is a power that directly affects life. The target of the ability is life, not an individual. That's why it can go through the divine artifact nullification and work on Lezavim, Draeger explained. In other words, as long as it goes through the divine artifact nullification defense, then the divine artifact nullification can work on Lezavim. The Holy Grail directly targets life, so it doesn't need to come into contact with the divine artifact nullification defense. Draeger's words made Noah raise his eyebrows, and the corner of his mouth slowly rose. Defense? If that's the case, that's right. Draeger confirmed Noah's thoughts. If you use the third ability of the gauntlet, which can penetrate defense, then the son of the Demon King's divine artifact nullification won't be a problem. In other words, even the strongest ability that Lezavim was so proud of would not work on Noah. If there was another chance to fight, then Noah would definitely be able to give Lezavim a big surprise. At this time, Asashel said to Noah again. However, the most terrifying thing about Lezavim is not his strength, but his malice. That guy is a real bastard, and I'm sure you've seen it. Even Wally hates him, and has always wanted to kill him. I'm worried that, with that guy's level of bastard, after he gets the Holy Grail, he won't just use it to revive the evil dragon and increase his combat power. Then what else can he do? Noah asked subconsciously. Could it be that there's still a terrifying existence that can be revived? I'm not sure, but I'll let the major forces investigate, Asashel said with a very serious tone. I have a feeling that the real crisis is coming. Noah narrowed his eyes slightly and nodded slowly. After that, Asashel said that he would bring Valerie back to the underworld and let the demons, angels, and fallen angels protect her. He would definitely not let the other two holy grails in her body be used by people with evil intentions. Moreover, King Kaipesh had already awakened, and Queen Camilla also expressed her willingness to have another discussion. When the vampires were done dealing with the aftermath, they would sit at the negotiating table with the two major forces, Kaipesh and Camilla, to promote this time's peace talks. With the existence of the grace of saving the vampiric world, as well as the common enemy that destroyed their home, as well as the promise of the major forces to assist in the reconstruction of the vampiric world in the near future, it was believed that the matter of the peace negotiation could be considered to be completed. In view of this, Noah's group had to continue staying here for a while. Noah had no objections to this. As for the school, Song was in charge, so there was nothing to worry about. As for the family, Orpheus also had Aster and Athena to accompany him. Although there were some parts that were worrying, with Athena, the former goddess of wisdom, there shouldn't be any problems. The rest was the matter here. After exchanging opinions and plans with Asashel, Noah brought Lilith out of Valerie's room. As soon as he came out, Noah met someone. Gasper. Noah was surprised for a moment, and immediately understood. Are you here to see Valerie? Yes. Gasper's expression seemed a little sad. Although Valerie will be transferred to the underworld soon, I'm still a little worried. Gasper's worry was not without reason, because Gasper and Valerie were childhood sweethearts. They grew up together and suffered the contempt and disdain of the pure-blooded vampires toward the mixed bloods. They supported each other in their dark lives. That was the reason why Gasper had reacted so strongly to Valerie's name. It was said that the reason Gasper was able to escape from the vampire's territory and meet Leah was because of Valerie's help. Under such circumstances, it was naturally impossible for Gasper not to have a reaction to Valerie's name. After learning about this, Noah was also glad that he did not directly destroy the Holy Grail when facing Lesavim. Otherwise, this timid student of his would probably hate him for the rest of his life. Asashel is helping Valerie with her examination. It should be over soon. Noah patted Gasper's shoulder. You can go in directly. Got it. Gasper quickly responded and walked past Noah. Just as he was about to enter the room, he suddenly stopped and looked in Noah's direction with hesitation in his eyes. Seeing this, Noah seemed to have seen through Gasper's thoughts and said, "Don't worry. If there's a chance, I'll take the Holy Grail back." Gasper's spirits were lifted, and he bowed deeply to Noah before entering the room. Noah suddenly smiled. Suddenly, two panicked voices were heard again. Teacher. Lord Noah. They saw Gasper's family member, Laibel, and Valerie's team member, Luffy, running over at the same time with a panicked expression and called out, "Oh no! The two cats are about to fight again." Noah was completely stunned. Chapter 1929. When Noah was led into a room by Laibel and Luffy, the tense atmosphere in the air immediately caught his attention. In the room, a pair of cat sisters were looking at each other. Ugh. Kitten's body tensed up as she stared at her sister with an extremely vigilant and stern gaze. It was as if she could pounce on her sister at any moment, just like an enraged house cat. Meow. Black Song had an incomparably flirtatious smile on her beautiful face. Seeing her sister staring at her with vigilance and sternness, she was completely indifferent. She was like an evil wild cat. The pair of cat sisters did not speak at all. They only looked at each other, but their expressions were completely different. Even their temperaments were as different as heaven and earth. Those who did not know would definitely not think that these two cats were sisters, right? Sensing the tense atmosphere between Kitten and Black Song, Laibel and Luffy timidly hid behind Noah. They grabbed onto Noah's clothes and poked their heads out to look at the sisters looking at each other. Noah also rubbed his forehead as he felt a headache coming on. He asked in a low voice, "How did this happen?" I don't know either." Laibel subconsciously lowered her voice and answered, "I just wanted to find Kitten to eat something together, but when I found Kitten, it was already like this." It was worth mentioning here that Kitten and Laibel's relationship was exceptionally good. Even though Little Kitten seemed to dislike Little Kitten when she first became a member of the Jimmins, quarreling with Little Kitten every day, but as the saying goes, the more you quarrel, the more you develop feelings for each other. Now Kitten and Laibel's relationship was so good that they stuck together every day. Although everyone in Jimengli's household had a good relationship with each other, there was still a difference in the order of precedence. For example, Leah's and Junai's relationship was so good that they were like sisters. They were not like master and servant at all. Usually, as the big sisters in the group, they would take care of the other members together. Aisha, Genova, and Irina had gotten along well with each other as the three members of the church. They were so close that they stuck to each other every day, and almost never split up. Yudu and Gasper were the only two male members of the Jumanli family, and their relationship was also very good. It was said that they would sometimes go to Issei Hyuga's house together, and get along well with him. They even stayed overnight at Issei Hyuga's house together. It made people wonder what the three of them were doing all night. Because of her position as a teacher, Lesvius had more contact with the other teachers in the academy. She was also a big sister and had a good relationship with Laius and Junai. Still, the war goddess had an unexpected muddle-headed side. She could be considered a muddle-headed big sister. Only Kitten and Laibel were left. In the past, because she lived with Noah at the same time, Kitten had the best relationship with Isha. Now Kitten and Laibel had started to develop feelings for each other during their quarrel, while Isha was occupied by Genova and Irina. This made Kitten's relationship with Label much smoother. Therefore, it was not strange that Label would come to Kitten to work with her. However, they did not expect that Black Song would come to Kitten as well, and things would turn out this way. Miss Black Song didn't come here specifically to look for Miss Bain. We were just strolling around the castle because Captain Varley is currently nowhere to be found. Luffy raised her hand weakly. Then we met Miss Bain here, and things turned out this way. In other words, Black Song and Kitten just happened to run into each other here. It was not that Black Song deliberately went to Kitten to do something to her. Unfortunately, due to their personal grudges, the meeting between Black Song and Kitten had turned into a confrontation. The two sisters probably didn't expect to bump into each other here, so they didn't know what to say and just stared at each other. Little did they know that this kind of atmosphere was too unbearable for those who knew about the grudges between the two. Therefore, as Kitten and Black Song's companions, Label and Luffy could not stand this kind of atmosphere and could only run away, looking for Noah to save the day. After understanding the whole situation, Noah narrowed his eyes and looked at Black Song and Kitten, who were silently staring at each other, and barged in helplessly. How long do you want to stare at each other there? Noah directly barged in, and smoothly ignited the tense atmosphere between Black Song and Kitten. Teacher. Kitten acted as if she had been saved, and almost reflexively hid behind Noah, squeezing Label and Luffy out. It seemed that Kitten was still very afraid of her sister, and that she was just putting on a brave front earlier. Although they were sisters, Black Song was a wanted criminal who had killed her master, causing Kitten to be regarded as a dangerous person by the higher-ups of the Fiend Realm, and was the main culprit who had almost caused Kitten to be executed. Therefore, Kitten still held a grudge against Black Song, and was very resistant to him. Black Song was naturally the clearest about this. However, this black cat did not have the slightest bit of self-awareness. She blinked at Noah and smiled sweetly. Aya? Why are you here? I'm just greeting Bain, okay? You're not worried that I'll attack Bain, are you? Is that very strange? Noah asked directly. Don't forget, you have a criminal record. Are you referring to the first time Orpheus saw you? Black Song waved his hand. At that time, I was only instructed by Wally to lure you out. Taking Bain away was just convenient, meow. I think so too. Kitten hid behind Noah and poked her head out, staring intently at Black Song. Sister didn't want to take me away in the past, and I don't think you will now, right? That's right, that's right. Black Song nodded with a smile. So don't worry about what I'll do, meow. Kitten bit her lips when she heard Black Song's nonchalant words, and some resentment appeared on her usually emotionless face. Hey, Label stood up for Kitten and pointed at Black Song, shouting, You're not allowed to bully Kitten. You're not allowed to bully Kitten. Woo meow. Black Song blinked again, and the smile on his face became even brighter and more moving. Why? Bullying younger sisters is the privilege of older sisters, meow. But do you see Kitten as your younger sister? Label said with some agitation. If you do see Kitten as your younger sister, why did you abandon her back then? Don't you think it's too late to say such things now? Label's words caused the tense atmosphere to turn sinister. Kitten bit her lips harder and harder. Black Song still had a smile on his face, as if he didn't care at all. Only Luffy actually stood up at this time and looked seriously at Lei Bei. Please don't speak of Miss Black Song like that. Miss Black Song isn't that kind of person. Luffy's words made Noah slightly stunned, and a thoughtful light flashed through his eyes. However, Lei Bei was completely unconcerned. She thought that Luffy was speaking up for Black Gu, and her anger began to rise. She immediately snorted, turned her head away, and said these words. What do you mean by not that kind of person? You dare to do it, but don't dare to admit it? That's not it. Luffy retorted. Miss Black Song is just... All right, little Luffy, thank you for speaking up for me. However, I'm not even agitated, so why are you so agitated, meow? Black Song shrugged, looking indifferent. Anyway, I'm just a bad cat. There's nothing wrong with that, meow. It had to be said that Black Song's indifferent tone and frivolous words were extremely infuriating to those in the know. As expected, Kitten couldn't help but murmur. Big sister is the worst. Black Song glanced at Kitten, indifferent to Kitten's murmurs. However, Noah, who had been observing Black Song all this time, noticed it. There was a flash of sadness in Hei-ji's eyes for a split second. Noah's eyes flashed and he suddenly smiled when he caught the sadness in her eyes. Is that so? I think Black Song is rather cute. In that instant, the entire place quieted down. A different kind of tension from before, and a different kind of heaviness from before. A somewhat strange atmosphere began to replace the surrounding atmosphere, permeating the air. Chapter 1930. At this moment, all the girls present turned their gazes towards Noah, each with a different expression. Teacher. Kitten looked at Noah with eyes full of disbelief. Teacher. You. Label's expression was extremely stiff. Wah wah. Wah wah wah. Lu Fei's face turned red. As for Black Song, her eyes widened. After looking at Noah for a while, she suddenly cheered and pounced on Noah, giving Noah a fright. Wah meow. That's great meow. Black Song was overjoyed as she shouted. Little brother Godslayer's favorability has finally been maxed out? It really wasn't easy meow. Maxed out your head. Noah had an embarrassed expression. Do you think this is a game? You want to farm favorability? Indeed, when Miss Black Song has nothing to do, she would sneak into the game center to play games. Lu Fei seemed to have realized something, and her face turned even redder. So it's that kind of game? It seemed that little sister Lu Fei had completely misunderstood. At this moment, little Kitten and Label finally came to their senses. Sister. Kitten glared at Black Song, looking somewhat agitated. What did you do to teacher? Kitten thought that Noah's abnormal behavior was because Black Song had used some sort of bewitching spell. No. He couldn't have been tricked by that bad cat. Teacher. Lei Bei cried out in panic. That's an illusion. It's all an illusion. Even Label thought that Noah had been hit by some sort of spell that made him lose his mind. It really made her speechless. Indeed, Black Song's actions had a sort of bewitching feeling, but that did not mean that Black Song was a casual woman. In fact, not only did Black Song keep her chastity, she definitely would not use any sort of bewitching spell. The reason why she usually acted so charmingly was because of her casual nature. Cats were rather amorous creatures to begin with. As a cat demon, it was not strange for Black Song to have such a personality. On the other hand, Kitten, undoubtedly Nikomata, was so serious that it was abnormal. However, even if it was a kitten, didn't it tempt Noah before because of the arrival of the estrus? Therefore, frivolous behavior did not mean that Black Song was a casual woman. Moreover, even if they didn't use any magic, there probably wouldn't be anyone who thought that Black Song wasn't good-looking, right? It was a fact that Black Song was cute. However, the cuteness Noah was referring to was not her appearance, but her heart. Bang. With a muffled sound, a fist smashed into Hei-ji's head. Meow. Black Song suddenly let out a sorrowful cry. He covered his head and squatted down. Noah slowly retracted his fist and glared at Hei-gu in exasperation. I'm just praising you, and you're already sticking to me. What are you going to do if I continue to flatter you? What else can we do, meow? Black Song said matter-of-factly as he rubbed his aching head. Of course, little brother Godslayer. You can do whatever you want, meow. Noah was speechless. Was this wild cat really not a casual woman? Noah began to doubt his previous thoughts. On the other hand, Kitten, Label, and Lu Fei stared blankly at the development in front of them. They were at a loss. What was the situation now? Was there any more charm or magic? Noah sighed softly and ignored Black Song, who was covering his head and complaining. He turned around, squatted down, and looked at Kitten. Hey, Kitten. Noah looked straight at Kitten and asked very seriously, have you ever wondered why Black Song killed his own master and left you behind? Kitten was stunned. Label was also stunned. Lu Fei kept her mouth shut. As for Black Song, his complaints came to an abrupt end. He stopped fooling around and looked at Noah with eyes full of boredom. I say, little brother Godslayer, don't tell me you're also planning to intervene in the matter between me and Baiyin? Are you trying to say that I'm meddling in other people's business? Noah glanced at Black Song. That might be true for you, But for me, Kitten's business is my business. I don't only care about your business, but also Kitten's business. If you want to protest, then blame your parents. Why did they make you two sisters? Black Song was immediately speechless. Kitten, on the other hand, calmed down. She glanced at the silent Black Song, and then lowered her head. She could not help but speak. I hate Big Sister. It wouldn't be an exaggeration to say that I hate her. No matter what reason Big Sister had back then, she abandoned me. That is the truth. That's right. No matter what reason she had. It was the truth that Black Song had abandoned Kitten. Moreover, isn't the reason why that cat killed her master very clear? Laybell said angrily. Because her talent was too strong. She began to stand out after being reincarnated as a demon. In the blink of an eye, she surpassed her master and was immersed in her own power, unable to extricate herself. In the end, she was unwilling to be controlled by a master who was weaker than her. She killed her master and escaped. I've seen many such outliers. Basically, those who killed their own masters and became stray demons had fallen for similar reasons. Therefore, in the eyes of Kitten, Laybell, and the others, Black Song's betrayal was not something to be doubted, right? However, Noah still wanted to say something. Indeed, there are many people who are immersed in their own power, unable to extricate themselves. But do you think Black Song is like that? Hearing this, Kitten and Laybell both looked in Hei Ji's direction, only to receive a malicious smile from Hei Gu. I also like the feeling of gaining power, Black Song said with a smile. Not only gaining power, but I also like the feeling of fighting with power. Otherwise, I wouldn't have joined the disaster group and Wally's team. This was the truth. In Wally's team, apart from Luffy, the others were probably all battle maniacs. They were completely unable to settle down, which was why they were attracted to Wally and moved together with him. Even if they were wanted by both orthodox mythological organizations and terrorist villains at the same time, they followed Wally without complaint and fought all the way. However, liking to fight doesn't mean that you're an evil person. Having great power doesn't mean that you'll be devoured, Noah said lightly. Otherwise, I'd be the greatest evil in this world. Everyone was speechless. Thinking about it carefully, among the people present, the one who was most likely to be immersed in power was Noah. Noah was only a weak human, but he had a terrifying power that was almost invincible in the world. Even if all the Asura gods and Buddhas of the mythological organizations combined, they would definitely not be able to defeat him. He was completely capable of doing whatever he wanted in this world. If Noah really wanted to, he could kill all the humans and capture all the races. That was absolutely possible. How did it feel to have a god lick your toes? Did you feel superior when you let the Demon King drink the water that you washed your feet with? Taking in all the famous goddesses, female demons, and female angels of all races as his own, living a life of pleasure every night, and doing whatever he wanted every day. For a human, was there any temptation? And if Noah really wanted to do all these, who dared to say that Noah couldn't do it? Who dared to say that they could stop him? No one. No one could stop Noah. As mentioned before, Noah could do whatever he wanted. However, Noah wouldn't do that. The real evil is not the behavior, but the heart of a person. Noah said indifferently, what you see and hear may be false, but your heart won't lie. With that said, Noah looked at Kitten and asked, you and Black Song have depended on each other since you were young and grew up together. Ask yourself, is the sister who grew up with you the kind of person who would be so immersed in power that she would ignore you and even abandon you? Kitten opened her mouth, but her voice was so hoarse that it shocked her. Noah looked at Black Song again and said, ask your heart too. Do you really think that it doesn't matter how Kitten sees you? Black Song lowered his head and fell silent. I think that in this world, there's nothing more worth protecting than family. Noah sighed. It's not impossible to break off the relationship, but it's not that easy to repair it. So, I think that you two sisters should have a good chat. Otherwise, under the threat of the group of disasters, who knows when you'll be separated by life and death? By then, it'll be too late to regret it. Kitten and Black Song looked at each other, and there was an indescribable wave in their eyes. The entire place returned to silence once again. However, the atmosphere this time was not tense, nor was it heavy, nor was it strange. There was only a hint of sadness. Looking at the silent kitten and Haegu, Noah stood up, looked at Labelle and Luffy and spoke softly. He said softly, "Let's go out and let the two sisters have a good chat." Luffy nodded without any objections. Labelle no longer objected and nodded with a complicated expression. Just like that, Noah brought Labelle and Luffy out of the room and closed the door. The two sisters were left alone. They looked at each other and did not speak for a long time. However, this silence did not last for long. "Sister." Kitten's voice was somewhat sobbing. "Please tell me the truth from back then." Hearing this, Black Song understood. He could not escape. Chapter 1931. After retreating from the room where the two sisters were, Luffy immediately closed the door, letting the soft sound of the door closing echo in the corridor. Seeing the door mercilessly close, Labelle still seemed somewhat worried. "Hey teacher." Labelle worriedly said. "Is there really no problem? What problem could there be?" Noah shrugged. "Don't tell me Black Song will eat Kitten? If she really wanted to do that, she wouldn't have waited until now, right? But I'm still a little worried." Labelle could not help but say this, turning her head to ask Luffy. Why would Kitten's elder sister want to kill her own master? Hearing Labelle's question, Luffy fell silent. After hesitating for a while, she sighed. "Actually, I've only heard about it from Miss Blacksong," Luffy said hesitantly. Miss Blacksong said that her previous master was a bastard, very annoying, and that it was more comfortable to live with Captain Varley. "A bastard?" Noah thoughtfully smiled. "It seems that I more or less understand Blacksong's difficulties." Labelle tilted her head, seemingly still not understanding. "What do you mean?" "Actually, the reason shouldn't be hard to guess. It's very easy to think of it, but you just don't want to think about it." Noah looked at the puzzled Labelle, and could not help but sigh. "Labelle, although your family treats you like a little princess, and Laius as your master, cares for you family members very much, please think carefully. How many demons in the demon world treat their own family members with sincerity?" Labelle's pretty face could not help but change slightly. The eldest daughter of the Phoenix family was not an idiot. On the contrary, she was a military figure. Usually, when the Zymonts were on missions, she would often exchange opinions with Queen Laius and formulate countermeasures. Thus, she had always been deeply trusted by Laius. Therefore, with Labelle's intelligence, she immediately understood Noah's words. In the eyes of ordinary people, demons are evil to begin with, right? Noah could not help but laugh. "Although that's what I say, I won't kill all of them. At the very least, I have a good relationship with the current Devil King, Jimenez's family and Citi's family. But just like how there are good people and evil people, there are good gods, and there are evil gods like Loki from Northern Europe. There are also bastards among demons, right? And Black Song is the highest-ranking cat elf of the Nikomata clan. Not only is his bloodline pure and noble, but his talent is also astonishing. He is proficient in magic, immortal arts, and demonic arts. It's not hard to guess what will happen if such a seedling falls into the hands of a bastard demon," Noah said calmly. "If the previous owner was a vicious person, then he would have used Black Song's power to commit all sorts of crimes. If the previous owner was a narrow-minded person, then he would have been jealous of the excellence of his dependents. It wouldn't have been strange if he had wanted to personally destroy his dependents. Since Black Song had described his previous owner as a bastard, then I guess that the previous owner must have been greedy for the amazing talent that Black Song had displayed." Greedy. Labelle was stunned at first, but then she suddenly trembled. Could it be? Have you thought of it?" Noah curled his lips. "That's right. The power of a cat elf is already so tempting. Generally speaking, if there's a second cat elf, no matter which demon it is, they would want to take it in their pocket, right? Black Song and Kitten had depended on each other since they were young, and had always grown up with each other. Even after Black Song became a family of a demon, Kitten had always followed him and never left him. Under such circumstances, according to Noah's words, Laibel would really be an idiot if she still did not understand the meaning. In other words, Black Song's former master set his sights on Kitten? Laibel was somewhat in disbelief. Kitten's older sister killed her own master just to protect Kitten? Of course, this is only my guess. Noah turned his head and glanced at the tightly shut door as he muttered. But seeing Black Song's reaction, this guess should be the most convincing, right? Laibel did not know what to say. At this time, Lu Fei spoke softly. Once Miss Black Song encountered a strong enemy. Although she defeated her opponent in the end, she was heavily injured. Even I was frightened, but she did not care at all. Lu Fei recalled the situation at that time and lowered her voice. According to what Miss Black Song said at the time, she had undergone extremely chaotic strengthening training in the past. Compared to that, her current injuries are nothing. Noah and Laibel understood what Lu Fei meant. Without a doubt, that so-called chaotic strengthening training could only have been personally inflicted by Black Song's former master. There was no other possibility. This was enough to show what kind of person Black Song's former master was. Of course, it was also possible that Black Song was lying. But putting aside Noah, as a pure-blooded demon of the Phoenix clan, Laibel knew that such things were not rare in the fiend realm. Just as Noah had said, there were good people and evil people. Although not all demons were as evil as the legends said, there were truly evil demons. Demons generally revered strength. After the demon chess pieces were developed and superior demons were able to have their own dependence, this concept of revering strength still affected most demons. Thus, in order to obtain powerful dependents and servants with limitless potential, many demons would use unscrupulous means. Some of them would force and harm the person they liked, forcing the other party to become their dependents. Some would conduct inhumane training on their dependents, completely disregarding the safety and condition of their dependents, blindly strengthening them. Some would even use the method of extracting potential and life force to make their dependents fight with all their might, and then abandon them when they were no longer of any use. It was extremely vicious. Even Laibel's brother, Laia's former fiancé, Riesel, did not treat his dependents as his personal property and order them around as a matter of course. On the other hand, the pure-blooded demons of the Gimli clan were known for their gentleness. They sincerely cared for their dependents, which was why such things did not happen. Like vampires, demons are also a race that lives in the dark, Noah mentioned, intentionally or otherwise. Many of the demons' bad habits and ideas are not flattering. That's why the 4 demon kings, Sazax, Achuka, Seraph, and Falubium, spared no effort in promoting peace between the various factions in an attempt to change the concept of the race with the change of the world. Perhaps Athaziel, the governor of the fallen angels, has similar thoughts? Noah spread his hands. After all, the fallen angels are also evil in the Bible. There must be some problematic people among them, right? Every family had its own problems. Since even a family was like this, there was no need to mention a race. Although Noah was a loner, he was also the leader of 2 guilds in another world. As the leader of a guild, Noah knew very well what kind of consideration and labor he had to put in. Therefore, Noah's words were undoubtedly quite persuasive. In short, let's leave the matter of Black Song and Kitten to them. Noah said to Laibel and Luffy. We'll just quietly watch from the sidelines. Laibel and Luffy both nodded. Then Noah, Laibel, and Luffy left the scene. Laibel and Luffy returned to their respective residences, probably very moved by Noah's words. Noah, on the other hand, brought Lilith, who had stayed outside the room. Just as he was about to return to the room, he encountered an unexpected person on the way. Looking at the silver-haired youth slowly walking toward him, Noah stopped in his tracks. Varley seemed to have only just noticed Noah. He raised his head and met Noah's gaze. Noah noticed it at that moment. Varley's eyes and expression were somewhat abnormal compared to before. If the previous Varley was a pure warrior, who only knew how to press forward with indomitable will, then the current Varley was like a madman who had stopped halfway and was hindered by something. The fighting spirit in his heart was replaced by another emotion. What emotion was that? Hatred. Noah saw hatred in Varley's eyes. What the hell happened? Chapter 1932. At this moment, the sky was almost bright and the commotion in Kaipei Royal City had gradually subsided. In the corridor, Noah and Wally looked at each other, but no one spoke. Instead, Lilith, who had been held by Noah, twitched her nose and looked at Wally. Dragon. Lilith mumbled as if she was in a dream. The smell of a white dragon. Lilith's words immediately made Noah and Wally turn their eyes to her. I see, Wally said with a blank expression. Is this the upper half of Orpheus? Noah nodded and said so. Her name is Lilith. Is that so? Wally closed his eyes, but his voice was trembling. That bastard actually gave Orpheus half a name like that. The name Lilith originally belonged to the mother of demons, and Lezavim was the son of demon king Lucifer, and the mother of demons Lilith. In other words, this name should have belonged to Wally's great-grandmother. I heard that the person currently leading the disaster is Lezavim. Wally opened his eyes and looked at Noah. You've seen him, right? Not only have I seen him, Noah answered truthfully. We even fought. Really? Wally's expression became serious. What do you think of that guy? Not much, Noah said without mercy. He's just a bastard. I feel the same. That guy is too despicable. He really doesn't deserve the name of Lucifer. Wally clenched his fist. His tone was full of sarcasm and sincere hatred. But although he's despicable, that guy's strength and ability are really troublesome. Varley's face was filled with unwillingness as he spoke. To be honest, it was the first time Noah saw Wally like this. This kind of performance was simply not seen from Wally in the past. Coupled with the sarcastic and hateful expression when Wally mentioned Lezavim, Lezavim's grandfather must have done something bad to Wally. Come to think of it, Wally's background was something worth pondering. Why did this gifted child who inherited the bloodline of Lucifer and the power of the White Dragon Emperor join the camp of the fallen angels, and be raised by Athashel instead of staying with Lezavim, his blood relative? There must be a reason behind this, right? There was only one thing that could be confirmed. That was, Wally didn't treat Lezavim as a family member at all. He even hated him. If possible, Wally would want to kill Lezavim more than anyone else, right? Unfortunately, this goal was too difficult for Wally. Although Wally was a descendant of Lucifer and had extremely high-level abilities, most of Wally's strength was limited to the artifact. Although his strength was not weak, at best, he was only at the level of the highest level demon. Only by using the artifact could Wally jump to the Demon King level. Even when using the Tyrannosaurus Rex, in terms of strength alone, he was comparable to the top 10 in the world. His strength was not weaker than the famous Shura gods and Buddhas. However, the power from the artifact was ineffective against Lezavim, who had the ability to nullify the artifact. Once Wally went up against Lezavim, he would definitely lose. After all, not counting the artifact, Wally was at most at the level of the highest level demon. As for Lezavim, as a surpasser, even if his strength was not as good as Sazavim and Achuka, he was much higher than the Demon King level. Without the artifact, Wally probably couldn't last a few moves in Lezavim's hands, right? Even if he used the artifact, in front of the artifact nullification ability, Wally couldn't do anything to Lezavim, and was destined to lose. In this way, how could Wally be willing? But if it's you, even if you don't use the artifact, you can still defeat Lezavim, right? Wally stared at Noah closely. I'm right. What a pity. Noah didn't answer, but said indifferently. In the end he still escaped. As if Wally had expected it, he lowered his head and remained silent. Another cosmology. Wally said in a low voice. That's the name, right? Noah was slightly taken aback, and immediately nodded. Did you use it on that guy? Wally asked very solemnly. I used the ability called Another Cosmology. This time Noah didn't answer. Instead he looked straight at Wally and said, Don't worry. What do you want to ask? Wally was silent again, and finally spoke after a while. I just want to know if I have the possibility of defeating that guy now. Although he said so, Wally's expression told Noah that he already knew the answer to this question. After all, the other party was his grandfather. Even if Wally didn't do his duty, it was impossible for Wally not to know the general details of Lezavim. So, Wally probably also understood, right? If the divine artifact was really nullified, then the current him was definitely not Lezavim's opponent. It was just that Wally didn't want to admit it, which was why he had so many emotions. Frankly speaking, this kind of Wally really subverted Noah's impression of him. It seemed that the grudge between Wally and Lezavim was deeper than Noah thought. So Noah said so. If you want me to tell you the truth, I can only say that even if you have mastered Tyrannosaurus, if you don't find a way to nullify Lezavim's divine artifact, then you absolutely can't defeat him. This sentence made Wally clench his fists tighter and tighter, and he even gritted his teeth. Is that really the case? More unwillingness than before appeared on Wally's face. At this time, Noah's tone changed. But, you should have a card in your hand to defeat that guy. Wally was suddenly stunned. Noah looked at Wally and reached out his hand. Clank! A burst of crimson light flashed, and a ferocious dragon claw-like gauntlet appeared in Noah's hand. Immediately, Noah moved. Without any warning, Noah fiercely stomped on the ground and rushed to the front of Wally at a leisurely speed. He clenched his arm that was covered by the gauntlet, and with a whistling wind, he threw a punch at Wally. Wh! Wally didn't expect Noah to launch such a sudden attack. However, as the White Dragon Emperor who had always yearned for battle, Wally's combat skills weren't bad, and he reacted almost instantly. However, the distance between Noah and Wally wasn't that far, and the attack came so suddenly, and Wally's condition wasn't quite right, so for a moment, Wally didn't have time to use the divine artifact. At this moment, Wally could only increase the magic power in his body. Wong. A defensive magic array immediately unfolded in front of Wally, protecting him like a barrier. This defensive magic array that was hastily set up could only block the attack of a superior devil. For an invincible supermaster like Noah, it was almost useless. However, Wally, who was extremely sensitive, discovered that although Noah's punch came very suddenly, its momentum wasn't that terrifying, and its power wasn't that great either. At best, it was comparable to the full-force attack of an intermediate devil. The full-force attack of an intermediate devil? That level of attack was simply child's play for Wally, and he could completely block it with this defensive magic array. However, a second later, Wally realized that he was wrong. Clank! The fist that was aimed at Wally landed heavily on the defensive magic array, and it caused a sound similar to the collision of steel. However, in the next moment, a language sounded from the crimson gauntlet. Penetrate. Suddenly, the impact of the fist directly penetrated the defensive magic array, and like an invisible force, it slammed into Wally's chest. Bang! Along with the muffled sound, Wally squeezed out a muffled groan from his throat, and his body suddenly shook as if he was hit by a truck. He rubbed against the ground and slid out violently, only stopping after a while. Feeling the pain in his chest, Wally raised his head and looked at Noah in shock. What just happened? Chapter 1933. In fact, Varley was not unable to understand what had just happened. To put it simply, Varley successfully resisted Noah's attack. However, for some unknown reason, Noah's attack directly penetrated Varley's defense and hit Varley. What is that? Varley asked almost subconsciously. Is that also your ability? Before Noah had time to answer, a pair of light wings flashed out behind Varley. No, that's not the ability of the Godslayer. That's the ability of the Red Dragon Emperor Drake. Arubian's surprised voice sounded from the light wings. That was penetration, right? But how is that possible? What's wrong, Arubian? Arubian? Varley quickly asked. Do you know what happened just now? Of course, as the White Dragon Emperor. How can I not know what that is? Arubian's voice was full of surprise. That's the third ability of the Red Dragon Emperor, Drake. The third ability. Varley was stunned at first, then he noticed the key point. The ability of his life? That's right, Arubian said. When I, the twin heavenly dragons, was sealed into the divine artifact by the God of the Bible, my abilities were split into several parts. Only 2 of my abilities are left for the host to use. The red one is for multiply and transfer, while mine is for have and absorb. It has never changed. As for the rest of the abilities, according to the God of the Bible, It seems that they have been removed. Arubian did not hide the surprise and disbelief in his voice. Why did the red one suddenly have a third ability? Undoubtedly, this has never happened before. Of course, Arubian didn't know that Drake was just a soul now, residing in the artifact, and his ability was only reproduced by the artifact. In this regard, Noah opened his mouth and was about to say something, but Drake's voice sounded from the cage. Arubian, do you really think that the rest of our abilities were removed by the God of the Bible? Drake's words stunned Arubian. Although I don't know why the God of the Bible, as a god, created the God of Annihilation to give humans the power to kill gods, but since even the Forbidden Hand, which can destroy the balance of power, and the God of Annihilation, which can seal monsters, has the power of Tyrant. Compared to these, the power we had when we were alive shouldn't be considered dangerous, so there's no need to remove it, right? Drake's voice became low. At the very least, my flame and your poison, compared to the Forbidden Hand and Tyrannosaurus, should be more likely to be preserved, right? Arubian was a little speechless. On the other hand, Noah's attention was attracted by the other information revealed by Dalag. Your flame, and Arubian's poison? Noah asked in surprise. What does that mean? This time, both Drake and Arubian were silent. Only Wally seemed to know something, but he also remained silent. Seeing this, Noah frowned. Could it be that in addition to penetration, Drake has another ability? And that ability is more terrifying than the Forbidden Hand and Tyrannosaurus? If there is such a powerful ability, why didn't Drake say it? Under the effect of the artifact, that ability should have been reproduced, right? Don't think about it, partner. Drake sighed. After meeting Arubian, I stopped using that ability. In fact, I've almost forgotten about it. Unless Arubian uses the power of poison, it might be a good thing for me to keep my flame sealed. Hearing this, Noah's eyes flickered and he didn't say anything more. Although he was a little interested in the so-called flame and poison, it seemed that Drake and Arubian had their own difficulties, so it was better not to ask about it here. Back to the topic. Drake said as if he wanted to ease the atmosphere. I think that after the God of the Bible sealed us in the artifact, he didn't divide our power into several parts. Instead, he imposed some kind of seal on our power, leaving only the most basic two abilities. The rest of the abilities need to be awakened by meeting certain conditions. So, the reason why the previous hosts didn't awaken the third ability was because they didn't meet the conditions? Arubian understood what Drake meant. And your host met this condition, so he unsealed the ability of penetration? My host also didn't meet the conditions, Drake explained. It's just that he reproduced my ability from when I was alive in another way. This method can only be used by him. You should think of it as his uniqueness. Wally and Arubian suddenly both laughed bitterly, which was very rare. Uniqueness? Indeed, if a person who broke the rules had an artifact that also broke the rules, then it was obvious how special it was. This generation's host is really special. Arubian sighed. On one side is the God Slayer, and on the other side is Lucifer, but at the same time, he became our host, surpassing the previous Red Dragon Emperor and White Dragon Emperor. If the God of the Bible was not dead and saw this situation, I wonder what he would think. I don't know what the God of the Bible would think, but this time the host is very special, and I have to admit it, Drake said in a deep voice. In the past, the hosts would only be immersed in the power of the two heavenly dragons, unable to extricate themselves. In the end, they either led to self-destruction or continued the confrontation from when we were alive until death. This time, the hosts of the two heavenly dragons have all deviated from the trajectory of the previous generations. Not only have they developed in a completely different direction, but they are also not obsessed with the red and white confrontation. What's more, they have even cooperated together before. It's really incredible. Arubian sighed. In addition, the dragon god, who has always been in a transcendent position in the past, has also entered the world, and divided into two and came to our side. You have also regained the ability from when you were alive. It feels like the wheel that has been stagnant since we fought to the death, seems to have started to move again. That's why Arubian, Drake's voice rang out clearly. Our destiny, which began in this generation, seems to be over. Is that so? Arubian's tone became a little complicated, but also a little relieved. Yes, it's time to end it. The more powerful the dragon, the purer it was. Because of a reason that had long been forgotten, they had been fighting until now, and because of a sudden emotion, they announced the end of their destiny. The dragon side of the red dragon Emperor Drake and the white dragon Emperor Arubian was fully displayed in front of Noah and Wally, and it was surprising. However, at this moment, Noah and Wally both understood Drake and Arubian. Now, all the legendary evil dragons have been resurrected and gathered in one camp, which was completely unimaginable in the past. Noah opened and closed his palms that covered the gauntlet and said so. In that case, it's time for you two dragons to change the situation. You can't stay in the past. My goal is also in a higher place. Wally said as if he was talking to himself. The final opponent I want to fight is not the Red Dragon Emperor, who is immersed in the battle of destiny, but the invincible Red Dragon Emperor. With that said, Wally raised his eyes and looked at Noah. And the equally invincible God Slayer. Noah met Wally's gaze and smiled slightly. I welcome your challenge at any time. Wally suddenly smiled, and his smile was full of fighting spirit. In short, there's only one thing I want to say, and that is the ability of the two dragons when they were alive hasn't been lost, and they still exist in the divine artifact. Drake said solemnly. If you continue to exhaust the power of the divine artifact, then the other abilities that belong to the White Dragon Emperor may awaken. And my penetration ability is the ability to ignore defense and let the attack directly affect the opponent's body. Even if Lezavim's divine artifact is ineffective, I can still penetrate it and cause damage to him. Noah looked directly at Wally. The two dragons are equal existences. Since Lezavim can't do anything about the Red Dragon Emperor's ability, then as the White Dragon Emperor, you must have the ability to restrain him, but it hasn't been awakened yet. Unawakened power. Wally raised his hand and stared at it. Go after it. Noah said so. Go after the power to defeat the Demon King's son. Wally's eyes lit up again and then he nodded heavily. Chapter 1934. After that, Noah and his party stayed in the world of vampires for another week or so, waiting for the vampires to clean up the aftermath of the war. After cleaning up, King Copernicus and Queen Camilla finally found time to sit at the negotiating table with Noah and Asashel to discuss the peace treaty. After this disaster, King Saipesh and Queen Camilla seemed to have realized that the current situation would no longer allow the vampires to be self-contained and secluded themselves from the world. In that case, it would only lead to another disaster. In addition, the rebellion of the internal members had left a deep impression on the two of them, as well as the unstinting assistance of the other forces. Both King Copernicus and Queen Camilla had changed their minds and no longer insisted on their previous ideas. Under such circumstances, King Copernicus and Queen Camilla first made peace with Noah and Asashel as witnesses, announcing the end of the civil strife in the world of vampires for hundreds of years. Then they agreed to the conclusion of the peace treaty and became allies with all the mythical forces. At this point, all the foreign races in the world had concluded the peace treaty, and no one was left out. As a witness to the peace treaty, Noah successfully urged all the mythical forces to conclude the peace treaty, and he would continue to supervise the implementation of the peace treaty in the future. If any force violated the peace treaty and stirred up trouble, then Noah would personally take action and make that force suffer. It could be said that Noah was the suppressive force of all the mythical forces in the world. Moreover, basically, all the mythical forces made the choice to conclude the peace treaty because they were afraid of Noah's power. Therefore, after the vampires became the last to join the peace treaty, this unprecedented trans-century, trans-mythical, and transracial peace treaty became a crucial part of history, laying a great foundation for the future world pattern. In view of the fact that the person who promoted the birth of this peace treaty was Noah, and Noah was world famous for his ability to simulate another cosmology, this peace treaty was named the Star Creation Agreement. There was no doubt that this was a compromise that could be recorded in the history of various mythological systems. Under such circumstances, Noah's name as the God-slayer was also destined to be recorded in the history books. It would be known by the new generation of the various mythological forces, and it would be passed down for hundreds, thousands, and thousands of generations until eternity. In this event of great historical significance, Varley, Black Song, Luffy, Arthur, Beautiful Monkey, and Fenrir were removed from the wanted list. Their inclusion in the fallen angel camp became a small matter, and did not arouse much objection. When the vampire world was in chaos, Wally's team acted as allies and saved many vampires from the evil dragons, making a certain degree of contribution to the peace negotiations between the vampires. In the end, just as Asashel had expected, even though many mythological forces expressed their dissatisfaction with the whitewashing of Wally's team, the matter was left unsettled. In other words, from today onwards, Wally's team was officially an ally. They no longer needed to hide. There were 2 episodes worth mentioning. The first was the reconciliation between Black Song and Kitten. After learning the truth from Black Song, Kitten seemed to have cried for the whole night, but she returned to normal the next day and got along with Black Song again. Although Black Song and Kitten had become somewhat distant from each other due to the estrangement of many years, the two of them originally had a very deep foundation of feelings. After some time, they would one day return to how they were before, or even better than before, right? The second was the hidden power in Gasper's body. After the turmoil of the vampires, Lias brought Gasper to find Gasper's biological father, and asked about the hidden power that Elmaine Shelton had mentioned. Noah heard about the results of the inquiry later and was shocked. With Gasper's father telling the truth and Asashel assisting in the investigation and examination, Lias told Noah so. Just like the divine artifact of the 2 heavenly dragons has the souls of the Red Dragon Emperor and the White Dragon Emperor, and the other divine artifacts also have monsters sealed. The divine artifact in Gasper's body has the consciousness fragment of Balor, the demon god of Celtic mythology. Balor was the evil god in Celtic mythology, the king of the deep-sea giants named Fomer, and also the demon god who controlled the dark dragon of New Moon, Clon Quach. According to legend, demon god Balor possessed a demon eye that could kill all living things within his field of vision. Even the divine king of the Danu divine race, Nuada, was severely injured by his demon eye. In the end, he was killed by Balor's subordinate, the dark dragon Clon Koa. It was not until sun god Rouge became the new god king of the Danu gods that this evil demon god was killed and fell. And before he died, Balor's consciousness fragment was born. The reincarnation of the demon god's consciousness fragment. That was Gasper's true identity. Gasper's divine artifact that could stop time was born from the residue of Balor's power. After all, as the user of the demonic eye, Balor could be said to be the most famous one. Although Gasper's forbidden Balor view is powerful, it is still far from the legendary demonic eye that can kill people directly with its gaze, and even kill gods. That was what Asashel said to Noah on the day he found out the truth about Gasper. So in Gasper's body, there must be other powers hidden. Divine artifacts are really interesting things. From legendary dragons to legendary monsters, even demon gods can reside in them. The God of the Bible who created the divine artifact is really a terrifying existence. But, because of this territory makes me feel like I can't stop even if I want to. As he said that, Asashel volunteered to help Gasper develop the hidden powers in his body. Gasper himself was very afraid of this. Suddenly turning from a mixed-blood vampire into the reincarnation of the demon god's consciousness fragment, this kind of super development setting, most people might not be able to accept, let alone the timid Gasper. However, Asashel managed to persuade Gasper to change his mind. Don't be afraid of the power in your body, and don't be afraid of yourself. Whether or not you are the reincarnation of the demon god's consciousness fragment, you are still you. I won't let you be devoured by the demon god's power. You can also use this opportunity to become stronger. Perhaps in the future, you will have the chance to take back the Holy Grail with your own hands. Gasper, who was still afraid at the beginning, finally nodded after being persuaded. If he could really develop all the hidden powers in his body, there would be a day when Gasper would become a new demon surpasser. wouldn't he? A surpasser who combined the powers of demon god, vampire, demon, and human. His potential was unimaginable. Just like that, Noah's group finally returned to Chariot King Town after finishing their business in the vampire's territory. In an apartment in Chariot King Town, two petite girls were looking at each other in an indescribable silence. At the side, Aster and Athena also looked at the two girls who looked about the same age as them, and exchanged glances with each other. Not only do they look the same, but even their aura, temperament, and aura are exactly the same? Athena expressed such a thought. Other than the fact that they are the same person, there is no second thought. I can feel the exact same power from the two dragon gods. Aster looked at Noah expressionlessly. Master, do you intend to let the two dragon gods reunite as one? Reunite as one. Noah turned his gaze to Orpheus and Lilith. After looking at each other for a while, Lilith suddenly leaned forward like a small animal, and leaned close to Orpheus. She sniffed and called out softly, "The other Lilith, the other Lilith." Although it wasn't obvious on the surface, Lilith's voice was much more emotional than before. She seemed to be rather happy. Orpheus extended her hand and patted Lilith's head like an elder sister. Her face was still expressionless, but her eyes were fixed on Lilith and didn't move away. One had to admit that this scene was rather lovey-dovey. Therefore Noah smiled. That doesn't matter anymore. Chapter 1935. In the beginning, when half of Orpheus' power was taken away by the heroes and sent back to the disaster squad, Noah did want to take back the power and return it to Orpheus. It had been mentioned several times before that although only half of Orpheus' power was taken away, it made Orpheus infinite become limited. In terms of strength, it was not as simple as being reduced by half. But even so, Orpheus, whose strength had been greatly reduced, still had the strength to surpass the top 10 experts in the world. His strength had exceeded 4 digits, and he was in an ambiguous position between 3 and 4 digits. He was far from what the other Asuras, gods and Buddhas, who were only in the 4 digits, could compare to. It was conceivable that if half of the power was taken back and the limited returned to unlimited, what kind of state would Orpheus' original power return to? To be fair, if Noah lost half of his power, he would want to take it back no matter what. Due to this mentality, Noah wanted to help Orpheus regain the lost power at the beginning. On the contrary, Orpheus did not care about this at all. Aster and Athena naturally knew Noah's thoughts. So after Noah brought Lilith back, Aster asked Noah if he planned to reunite Orpheus and Lilith. However, that was equivalent to erasing Lilith's existence. Although they did not spend much time together, Noah could not do that kind of thing. Lilith was no longer an individual who simply had half of Orpheus' power, but another Orpheus was born from that half of power. Leswium did not erase Lilith's emotions, and allowed Lilith to retain the mind of a 4 or 5-year-old child. Perhaps he thought that compared to an emotionless puppet, a child like Lilith was easier to control? In short, in this way, Noah had no reason to erase Lilith. And Orpheus didn't seem to care about this. Instead, he acknowledged Lilith's existence and accepted her as a sister, which couldn't be better. Don't think that Orpheus did not have his own thoughts just because he stayed there quietly all day. Orpheus was actually very afraid of loneliness. Back then, the reason why Wally had brought Orpheus out of calamity was because Orpheus seemed to be very lonely. Noah had also asked Orpheus what he was doing when he was in the disaster group. At that time, Orpheus had answered Noah in this way. Sit in a chair, stay in the room, say your wish, and give them a snake. That was all. In the disaster squad, Orpheus' life was just like that. It was more like being used as a machine than a human's life. Noah, who now had some understanding of Orpheus and knew how innocent, naive, and afraid of loneliness Orpheus was, couldn't imagine how lonely Orpheus was back then. Therefore, Noah had to admit that it was the first time he had the urge to annihilate the entire disaster syndicate. If it wasn't for the fact that he didn't know the location of the disaster squad's headquarters at that time, Noah would have definitely taken action. However, later on, Orpheus had added another sentence. Wally, he talked to me. Even that battle maniac couldn't stand it. and took the initiative to chat with Orpheus? Sure enough, even if he joined the disaster syndicate for the sake of battle, he still couldn't be bad after being raised by Azazel. However, talking to a child was already Wally's limit. It would be too difficult for him to give a child a happy life. In the end, Wally brought Orpheus out of calamity and brought him to Noah's side, right? In Wally's eyes, although you were a strong enemy that he had to overcome, it was also because of this that his recognition of you was higher than anyone else, right? That was what Azazel had said when he found out that Orpheus was brought out of calamity by Wally and brought to Noah's side. In addition, you also took good care of the Jumanli and Seedy families who were students. Obviously, you were very good at taking care of people. At that time, Orpheus was also very interested in you, so Wally chose to bring Orpheus to your side and let you take care of him. Wally should believe in you, Azazel said to Noah with certainty. He believes that you can take good care of Orpheus and give Orpheus the life he wants. For this reason, Wally was regarded as a traitor by the Disaster Syndicate and went against them. When he found out about this, Azazel's face was full of pride. He almost directly said, "How can he be a bad guy when he was brought up by me?" At that time, Noah really wanted to say to Azazel, "You are the governor of the fallen angels, the leader of the bad guys." In the end, in order to save Azazel some face, Noah didn't say it out loud. But from this, it could be seen how Orpheus was living in the Disaster Syndicate. Even Wally, the battle maniac, couldn't stand it and brought Orpheus out, resolutely betraying the Disaster Syndicate. One could imagine how lonely Orpheus was in the Disaster Syndicate. Now living with Noah, Orpheus didn't look like anything on the surface, but she was actually very satisfied in her heart, right? Because of this, Orpheus didn't care about losing half of her power at all. She even directly gave up on the idea of defeating the real Red Dragon Emperor, and gave up on her previous dreams. "I don't want to go back to the dimensional gap." At that time, Orpheus said this to Noah. "I want to be with Noah." Yes, to Orpheus, Noah's home was her home. Her home was no longer the dimensional gap that had nothing in the past. Under such circumstances, Orpheus welcomed another sister. She must be more satisfied in her heart, right? Therefore, Noah also gave up his previous plan. Orpheus and Lilith, both of them were indispensable. Even if they couldn't return to infinite, even if they were no longer invincible, it didn't matter. Because no matter what kind of enemy appeared, these two children would be under his protection. That was enough. Just like this, Lilith also moved into Noah's apartment and lived with Orpheus and Noah. What was worth mentioning was that Aster and Athena no longer transformed into weapons like in the past. Instead, they came out to live with Orpheus and Lilith. This caused a very serious problem. Noah's apartment was too small. Even if other than Noah, the other four were all children, at least they looked like children, but in fact, other than Lilith who was just born not long ago, the other three had lived for God knows how long. For children and an adult were crowded enough. Therefore, a situation inevitably occurred. Should this be considered a benefit? Noah, who had just woken up in the morning, laid on the bed and looked at his surroundings, extremely speechless. He saw that Noah's bed was already crowded with people. Orpheus was lying on the left. Lilith was lying on the right. Aster was lying on the other side. And Noah was lying in the middle. His arms were tightly hugged by Orpheus and Lilith, while his neck was tightly hugged by Aster. That's fine. Noah couldn't help but complain. Sleeping is fine, but all of them are only wearing knee socks. What are they playing at? That's right. Not only Aster, but even Orpheus and Lilith were wearing knee socks. Except for knee socks, everything else was taken off. It was simply Aster's X3 state. Have they been led astray by Aster? Noah thought helplessly. Orpheus and Lilith were simply too pure and innocent, so they would learn everything. Not to mention Lilith, Orpheus often learned from Noah, and even learned from the behavior of the Jumanli's dependents. He seemed to be enjoying it. He probably learned this from Aster too, right? Of all things to learn, you have to learn this? Noah sighed. Noah gently broke away from Orpheus and Lilith's hugs, carried Aster in his arms, and carefully got up. At this moment, Noah noticed something strange. Looking at his arms that were tightly hugged by Orpheus and Lilith, Noah was startled at first, but soon after, he stood up in surprise. What is this? Chapter 1936. The morning sun shone in through the window and onto the bed in the room. The warm feeling made both Orpheus and Lilith look comfortable, and they hugged Noah even tighter. However, Noah's attention was no longer on Orpheus and Lilith, but on his own hands. Wisps of spiritual energy that were as faint as smoke drifted out of the bodies of the two dragon god girls, circled around them, and gradually entered Noah's body. As the wisps of spiritual energy entered, Noah could clearly feel it. He could feel the connection between Orpheus and Lilith. It was as if an invisible bridge had suddenly been built between Noah, Orpheus, and Lilith. Relying on this bridge, Noah could actually feel the hearts of Orpheus and Lilith. At this moment, Noah had a feeling. It was a feeling that he had grasped everything about Orpheus and Lilith. That feeling was as if it was telling Noah, no matter what Noah planned to let Orpheus and Lilith do, the two dragon god girls would no longer be able to resist, and would absolutely obey his orders. Noah was at a loss. What's going on? While Noah was at a loss, a voice suddenly sounded. Seems like you've picked up a huge bargain. The sudden voice made Noah react, and he turned his head and looked to the side. There, Athena sat up, looking as if she had just woken up, but her beautiful snake eyes were staring at the spiritual energy surrounding Noah's arm. Athena immediately said, "That's a contract." Contract. Noah was completely stunned. Of course, Noah was no stranger to contracts. Putting everything else aside, Aster and Athena were Noah's contracted elves. Letitia and Pest, who were still helping Noah solve his problems in the box garden world, were also contracted by Noah. The famous heroic spirit Medusa of the type moon world was also Noah's follower, and she still maintained a contract with Noah. So, how could Noah be unfamiliar with such a thing as a contract? But why did Orpheus and Lilith suddenly contract with him? Orpheus and Lilith probably didn't realize that they had formed a contract with you, right? Athena pondered for a while and gave this answer. These two children probably didn't want to leave you subconsciously and hoped to be with you forever, so they unconsciously formed a contract with you. Unconsciously, Noah felt the connection with Orpheus and Lilith in his body, and he was somewhat in disbelief. Are you for real? It was not that Noah was making a fuss about nothing, but until now, Noah had never encountered a contract that was formed without his consent, and without him even noticing. Although Noah had many contracted partners, and all of them had great backgrounds, this was only because of Noah's luck. It was not a simple matter for others to form a contract with someone. Indeed, many people knew the skills to enslave their contracted partners. For example, in this world, there were many summoning magic, and even summoning magic that could summon all kinds of monsters and people. But summoning was one thing, and being able to enslave was another. Generally speaking, the more advanced the summoner's skills and methods were, the easier it would be to enslave the summoned creature. However, if a contract was formed, it was another matter. For example, Noah had met the summoner of the Devil Star Spirit in the box garden Luce. That guy's target of enslavement was much stronger than him. The star spirit of the demon star, Algor. That was an existence that even White Yiksha could not help but praise. As the strongest species of the boxers, it should have at least 3 digits of strength. However, because it had formed a contract with that good-for-nothing Luos, its strength had been greatly reduced. Not only was it dragged down to 5 digits, but even so, Luos had also imposed many restrictions on it in order to make it easier for it to be controlled, causing its strength to decrease by quite a bit. It was simply a reckless waste of a heavenly treasure. Therefore, the contract itself was a very important matter. Whether it could succeed, what kind of situation it would lead to after it succeeded, what would happen during the process of forming the contract, and so on, were all uncertain. In the box garden, one could still use the outcome of the bestowment game to force a contract, but in other worlds, without the coercion of the bestowment game, who would be willing to form a contract with a good-for-nothing? Even if it was not a good-for-nothing, who would be willing to form a contract with someone who was much weaker than them and work for them? Just like in the world of the shaped moon, most of the heroic spirits who had transformed into servants were very difficult to control because of this. For this reason, a command spell that could forcefully carry out a command once became very precious. Of course, apart from coercion, there were also examples of powerful contract targets who had formed contracts with existences who were much weaker than them. However, that was generally a contract of equivalent exchange, not a servant contract. When some of the contract targets hoped to get something from the contractor, they would also form an equal contract and perform paid services. In exchange for what they wanted, they would provide power to the contractor. Under such circumstances, logically speaking, if Orpheus and Lilith, who were both the most powerful dragons and the most powerful deities, wanted to form a contract with them, it would be a matter of whether they could succeed or not. However, Noah was completely unaware that Orpheus and Lilith had formed a contract unconsciously. This only proves one thing, said Athena. The contract that Orpheus and Lilith have formed with you is a servant contract. They won't charge you any price and will obey your orders. This kind of benefit that comes directly to your door can naturally be carried out spontaneously without the consent of the other party at all. Thugs that came to his door for free and would obey his orders obediently. Who wouldn't want such a good thing? Not to mention, Orpheus and Lilith were not ordinary thugs, but between 3 and 4 digits. If the two were combined, they could even become an infinite dragon god, an existence that could reach 3 digits. Such existences obeying orders without complaint was simply a pie that fell from the sky. And it was a huge pie. This kind of servant contract that did not have any disadvantages for the contractor could only be concluded by the party who was willing to be the servant. According to Athena, Orpheus and Lilith subconsciously did not want to leave Noah and wanted to be with him all the time. Therefore, they voluntarily formed this kind of contract and unknowingly became contract partners who would obey Noah's orders. In this way, unless Noah took the initiative to sever the contract or died, even Orpheus and Lilith would not be able to sever the contract. This kind of contract is even more restrictive than the one you had with the Holy Sword Spirit. It is comparable to the contract you made in the box, or even the one you had with me. Athena's seductive eyes turned to Noah. Although her tone was indifferent, there was a hint of emotion in it. As expected of the man who is favored by all the worlds. Has even God finally been attracted to you? After Aster, Athena, Letitia, Pest, and Medusa, Orpheus and Lilith had also become contract partners of Noah. In response, Noah could only bitterly laugh. He stretched out his hand and stroked Orpheus and Lilith's heads lovingly while smiling at Athena. If it was only about attracting God, I would have attracted a certain goddess a long time ago, right? Athena raised her brows and looked at Noah's thought-provoking gaze. The corners of her mouth slowly curled up. That's why I said you are a man who is favored by the world, a lucky guy. After saying this, Athena turned into a burst of light particles and disappeared. Ugh. Aster, Orpheus, and Lilith continued to turn over and firmly stuck to Noah's body. Their exquisite faces that were usually expressionless were now filled with comfort and serenity. Noah could only smile helplessly, but did not get up again. He stroked the heads of the 3 petite girls in his arms and sat there quietly, waiting for them to wake up. I'll let these 3 girls continue sleeping for the time being. Just like that, the spiritual energy drifting from Orpheus and Lilith continued to enter Noah's body and did not subside for a long time. Chapter 1937. Concluded a contract with Orpheus and Lilith? In the reception room of an office building in Lilith, the capital of the underworld's demon king's territory, Asashel was completely speechless as he listened to the news that Noah had just brought. Concluded a contract with the infinite dragon god? Had this kind of thing happened before? No, right? Not to mention the almost invincible infinite dragon god. Even those miscellaneous gods and other mythical forces did not have many who had signed a contract with humans, right? In the end, Noah had done it easily. Moreover, it was a servant contract without compensation. Good Lord, you've done something that has never been done before, and I'm afraid will never be replicated in the future. How did this world give birth to such a foul human like you? Asashel really felt all kinds of imbalance. Back then, in order to conclude a contract with one of the 5 dragon kings, the golden dragon god Fafnir, not only did I use all kinds of connections, but I also found his whereabouts with great difficulty, and finally concluded an equal contract with compensation. So far, I don't know how many legendary treasures I've spent. You, on the other hand, casually abducted a dragon god, and lived with him for a period of time. You made him act cute all the time, and even brought back another dragon god. In the end, you actually made him willingly give himself to you. Which great god's illegitimate child are you? One of the 5 dragon kings, the golden dragon god Fafnir. That was the famous dragon king in Norse mythology, famous for collecting treasures from all over the world. The legend that dragons liked to collect treasures was mostly spread because of the actions of this dragon king. In order to be able to conclude a contract with Fafnir, Asashel had not only searched all over the world for this dragon king who flew everywhere and collected treasures from all over the world, but he also finally succeeded with all kinds of precious treasures as the price. One could imagine how difficult it was to conclude a contract with a powerful object. This was because Fafnir was famous for collecting treasures, and had a weakness that could be found. Asashel used this point to bargain, and finally succeeded in concluding a contract with a dragon king. Otherwise, even if I can find a dragon king, demon king, level contract partner, the difficulty of successfully forming a contract with him is definitely much higher than directly defeating him. Under such circumstances, Noah played with the 2 Lolas all day long and enjoyed himself immensely. In the end, the 2 dragon gods signed a contract with him. Not only was it free of charge, but it was also a servant contract that only obeyed his master's orders. How could Asashel feel balanced? In response, Noah merely rolled his eyes. Don't think I don't know. I've heard from Syzax that you're now eyeing Typhon, the king of monsters in Greece. You're planning to form a contract with him. Once you succeed, who would dare to mess with you in the future? The king of monsters in Greek mythology, Typhon. As mentioned before, this guy was the father of all kinds of famous demons. In terms of fame and strength, he was not below Fenrir before he lost his power. If it wasn't for the sudden appearance of Noah, then the person who replaced the declining Fenrir to enter the top 10 of the world would be Typhon. If Asashel could really form a contract with Typhon, it would be equivalent to getting a top 10 fighter in the world. Therefore, Asashel was just the pot calling the kettle black. Just as Noah was thinking about it, Asashel yelled out, "What are you doing? You also said that it would only count if the contract was successfully formed. If it was so easy to form a contract with Typhon, Zeus wouldn't have had his hands and feet broken by Typhon. Even if it was successful, I don't know what kind of price I would have to pay. If the other party pays with my life and even soul, even if it was successful, would I dare to form a contract with him?" That was true. Typhon's fame and strength were well known. But just like Fenrir, Typhon was also a fierce creature in his own mythology. He was not a kind person. For such a fierce creature, even if it could form a contract, the price to pay would definitely be a frightening level. It's because of this that the contract is difficult. Asashel sighed in all kinds of ways. Besides, Typhon can't be compared to Orpheus and Lilith. The more he said, the more Asashel felt unconvinced. It's already very surprising that Wally could subdue Fenrir, but that was also at the cost of a substantial reduction in Fenrir's power. Even so, he only let Fenrir be a member of the team, not a contract object. Asashel looked at Noah. "I'm starting to wonder, how did you manage to abduct those 2 dragon gods? Can you not talk about abduction every time you open your mouth? It feels very evil coming out of your mouth," Noah said angrily. Besides, Orpheus and Lilith also formed a contract unconsciously and spontaneously. They had never thought of forming a contract with me before. Even so, didn't you still succeed in getting those 2 dragon gods in the end? Asashel curled his lips. "Don't take it for granted." "You." Noah was speechless. "I'm not going to talk nonsense with you. I'm here to ask you for a favor." With that said, Noah took out his gift card and handed it to Asashel. "What's this?" Asashel's attention was immediately drawn to the gift card. He took it curiously and flipped through it. "I feel a wonderful power fluctuation. It shouldn't be an ordinary card, right? This card can be used to store a lot of things. Not only can it store food, water, and clothes, but it can also be used to store weapons, props, and other things that can exert power, Noah explained. In addition, it can also allow contract creatures to reside in it. So convenient. Asashel raised his eyebrows and became more interested in the gift card. It's quite an interesting prop. Why don't you let me study it? You can study it if you want. Noah shrugged. But before that, you have to help me see if there's any way to modify this card and make the space inside suitable for contract creatures to live in. Store food, water, and clothes. That was not the main purpose of the gift card. The main purpose of the gift card was to store gifts. After becoming Noah's contract creatures, Orpheus and Lilith were also considered Noah's gifts and could be stored in the gift card. However, Aster and Athena said that the gift card wasn't suitable for people to live in. If Aster and Athena were to stay in the gift card, they would choose to go into hibernation. They would only wake up when Noah called for them, or when they sensed that Noah was in trouble. After forming a contract with Orpheus and Lilith, Noah made a decision. In the future, he would bring Orpheus and Lilith with him, even if he went to other worlds. After all, Orpheus and Lilith were different from Letitia and Pest. There was nothing for them to do in this world. In addition to their purity, Noah really couldn't bear to leave the two dragon god girls behind. Noah really couldn't bear to leave them behind. However, although it wasn't difficult to bring Orpheus and Lilith along, it was difficult to bring two astonishingly pure little girls around the world. At this time, Noah thought of the gift card. It wasn't easy for Orpheus and Lilith to live a decent life. If I bring them along, I can't let the two children stay in a world with nothing and sleep alone all day long, right? Noah said. So, I want to ask you if there's a way to modify the gift card to make the environment inside more comfortable and easier to live in. In this way, Aster, Athena, Orpheus, and Lilith could live a comfortable life in the gift card that was no different from the apartment. For this purpose, Noah especially went to the underworld to look for Asashel, and asked this guy who could even create artificial artifacts to help him. If that's the case, it's not difficult. The demon realm originally had the technology to create an alternate space. Using that technology to modify your card, the success rate isn't low, Asashel said doubtfully. But, why do you have to go through so much trouble to bring a contract partner with you? Can't you summon a contract partner at any time by learning summoning magic or something like that? In other words, how could the summoning be successful? Don't worry about it, just do as I say. Noah sighed. By the way, why do you suddenly want to form a contract with Typhon? With that, Asashel's casual expression began to turn serious. You're tuning into the Dreamy Chapters YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.